to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. There being 132 members present, the House is now in session. Clerk will read a journal from the previous day.
Annapolis, Maryland, March 6, 2021.
Recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the journal from the previous day.
So order petitions, memorials, and other papers. Report of the Committee on Health and Government Operations, report number 14. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 92, Procurement, Invasive and Non-Native Plant Species, Prohibition on Use of State Funds. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Madam Speaker.
There you go. Okay. Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading amendments.
So ordered.
First Amendment limits the bill as to being a prohibition only on using funds for invasive species, and the Second Amendment is a prohibition only, limits the prohibition to outdoor projects. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment has been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Recognizing the gentlelady from Baltimore County.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Could the floor leader rise for a quick question?
Certainly.
Thank you. What does this do, and which plants are included in this?
Invasive plants.
What kind of invasive plants?
My goodness. I'm sorry. Madam Chair.
Committee Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bamboo is actually a good example of what's an invasive plant. It's things that take over, that don't belong here, and somebody has brought them in one way or another, and they've taken over, and we're trying to get rid of those things that are bad for the better plants for this climate, this area.
Okay, like is mint one of them? I know that's pretty
Pardon
invasive.
Me?
Mint, the mint family?
I don't know.
Oh, I'm seeing a shaking head over there. Okay. Do we have a list somewhere that we could look at? No, mint.
Delegate Kipke, do we have a list?
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The floor leader will yield. The Maryland Department of Agriculture keeps a list of invasive plants, and these plants are very harmful as it relates to farming. And so the Maryland Farm Bureau is very much in support of the bill now because of the way it's been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any other debate? No additional amendments. The bill is ordered now printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 272, Public Information Act, required denials, sociological information and distribution lists. Favorable amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Move so much be considered the reading amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 removes privilege for members of the General Assembly. Amendment number 2 requires an individual requesting a list of people contacted regarding an eminent domain process, requiring that they sign an oath that they will not use the information for commercial gain. Violation of that oath is a $1,000 penalty. These amendments are a result of work with all the affected parties. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Fossil 317, Maryland Green Purchasing Committee, Food and Beverage Procurement, Greenhouse Gas Emissions. Favor the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing floor leader.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
The amendments provide for an additional year before the bill would take effect in terms of the study by the Greenhouse Emissions Project, by this task force, the existing entity rather, and also the amendments also provide that that there would be a review of other factors in terms of the effect that this would have on inmates, on people who are hospitalized, and then finally on students who would be affected by the limitation. And finally, and those are the amendments. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. Question now is adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. The gentleman from Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was hoping to special order this. There are some things in the bill that might affect our region, specifically a pretty big project that we're working on. So I was hoping that you would agree to that.
To the next session.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Question for the House is special order House Bill 317 to the appropriate time next session. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill has been special order. Clerk will read the next bill.
Fossil 989, Public Safety 911 Emergency Telephone System Alterations. Favor the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 modifies the time an outage will last before triggering the backup system and moves responsibility for the study on workers' compensation laws trauma experienced by 911 specialists to the University of Maryland system. That was amendment number 2. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
Fossil 1040, Health Occupations Pharmacist Administration of Vaccinations. Favor the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 strikes language making the bill an emergency measure, changes the title to Health Occupations, Pharmacist Administration of Children's Vaccines, Study, and Temporary Authority, and makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 retains the current law. Amendment number 3 establishes a time period in which a pharmacist may administer a vaccine to a child, specifies requirements that must be met if a pharmacist administers a vaccine to a child that mirror the federal requirements, requires the Prevention and Health Promotion Administration in consultation with the State Board of Pharmacy to submit reports to specified committees of the General Assembly, provides that if the federal authority for a pharmacist to administer a vaccine to a child is repealed or otherwise expires by January 1st, 2022, the state authority established by the bill will terminate. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Report of the Committee on Judiciary, report number 20. Clerk will read the first bill.
Sorry, I thought we were going straight to the budget. Fossil 234, Criminal Law, Harm to Service Animals. Favor the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Is anybody here?
I think the floor leader is coming from the... Okay, we just special order this to the end of the calendar, Madam Speaker, please.
Okay, the bill has been special ordered to the end of the calendar. The clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 931, Child Care Providers, Notice of Allegations of Child Abuse or Neglect, Aiden's Law, favorable.
Question for the House is adoption of the favorable report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The favorable report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1072, Charles County Community Service and Pretrial Release Programs, authorization, favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much to be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 strikes references to eligibility requirements and the requirement that the sheriff perform certain services at the county's expense. Move the amendment.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Amendment has been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Special order calendar. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 234, Criminal Law, Harm to Service Animals, favor of the amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move so much to be considered the reading of the amendments.
So ordered.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 provides that the bill does not apply to normal veterinary practices. And Amendment number 3 alters the elements of the crime and the penalties in the bill and makes the restitution provisions discretionary. Move the amendments.
Question for the House is the adoption of the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments have been adopted. The question now is the adoption of the favorable report as amended. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Favorable report is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading.
It's the budget, right?
Special order calendar number 65. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 588, Budget Bill, Fiscal Year 2022, favor of amendments. Amendment number 1.
Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, the Appropriations Committee recommends 122 amendments to the budget. They are indicated on the committee report, and the committee report has been distributed. House Bill 589, the Budget Reconciliation Finance Act, will be taken up after the budget. Each year we set goals in the budget. This year, not quite knowing what the future is holding ahead of us, the Spending Affordability Committee recommended we craft a budget that provides us with adequate cash reserves and protects against a structural imbalance by avoiding the use of short-term federal support for ongoing costs. The budget exceeds these goals by leaving $734 million in general fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. Also, $1.1 billion in the rainy day fund. These are significant and can be realized by using available federal funding that has been budgeted by the governor of the state of Maryland. Madam Speaker, I will now turn to the committee amendments. Amendments are marked in the Appropriations Committee report that was made available to members and the public Wednesday morning. They are also indicated in the committee reprint of the bill. I will be introducing the amendments in the committee report by groups. After describing the amendments, I will move each group be adopted. I ask members to hold any additional amendments until after the committee amendments have been adopted. With your permission, Madam Speaker, let me turn to the first group of amendments. In the judiciary, Amendments 1 through 3 reduce funding for personnel expenses. Amendment 4 restricts district court funding to be used for implementation of DeWolfworth versus Richmond. Amendment 5 restricts funds pending a report that requires on requirements for bar attorneys. Amendment 6 restricts funds for electric and national gas bill payment assistance. Amendment 7 restricts funding to reclassify 2 positions in the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services. Amendment 8 modifies grant allocations, restricts funds pending a report. Amendment 9 restricts funding to perform an audit of the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services. Amendment 10 replaces general funds with special funds for violence intervention and prevention program. Move the amendments.
There any questions for amendments 1 through 10? Hearing none. All in favor for amendments 1 through 10, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. May continue, Madam Chair.
Amendment 11 and 12 restrict funding for reports on the Department of Aging programs. Amendment 13 and 15 reduce general and special funds for the Community for Life program, the Comptroller, and the Lottery program. Amendment 16 and 17 restrict funding to provide grants to the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra and to businesses impacted by the Purple Line construction. Move the amendments 11 through 17.
Any questions on amendments 11 through 17? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Continue, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the Department of Transportation, Amendments 18 and 19 require notification of changes to the Transportation Capital Program and establish a position ceiling. Amendments 20 and 21 restrict funding for reports. Amendments 22 and 24 cap funding for operating grants, require notification of changes in the capital program, and limit transportation bond debt. Amendments 25 and 26 require a report on non-traditional debt and establish a debt limit for non-traditional debt. Amendment 27 expresses legislative intent related to bridges. Amendment 28 restricts funding pending a report. In the Department of Natural Resources, Amendment 29 restricts funding pending a report on coal combustion byproducts. Move the adoptions of amendments 18 through 29.
Any questions on amendments 18 through 29? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposition? Continue, Madam Chair.
Thank you. In the Maryland Department of Health, Amendments 30 through 32 restrict funding pending a report on assisted reconciliation process, a report on a mass vaccination site in Montgomery County, and departmental vacancy rates. Amendment 33 and 34 restrict funding for a grant to the Center of Infant and Child Loss and report on the psychiatric rehabilitation programs. Amendment 35 restricts funding for the community grant services. To that purpose, Amendment 36 is technical. Amendment 37 restricts funding for the Medicaid state-funded mental health services. Amendment 38 restricts funding pending a report on the Developmentally Disabilities Administration, community services, utilization data, and spending forecasts. Amendment 39 restricts funding for a community services program. To that purpose, Amendment 40 reduces general funds in recognition of additional available federal funds. Amendment 41 restricts Medicaid provider reimbursements to that purpose. Amendment 42 reduces general funds in recognition of additional federal funds and special funds and lower expenditure trends. Amendment 43 is technical. Amendment 44 and 45 restrict funding for Medicaid, behavioral health provider reimbursement, and the Maryland Children's Health Program to that purpose. Amendment 46 restricts funds pending a report on institutions for mental disease. Amendment 47 reduces general funds in recognition of the additional federal funds for Medicaid. Amendment 48 and 49 are technical. Move the adoptions of Amendments 30 through 49.
Any questions on Amendment 30 through 49? The gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can we pull out Amendment 38 for just a quick question, or can I ask it? And I don't miss.
We have to let us adopt it first. We're going to adopt Amendments 30 through 37. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Floor Leader, Mr. Chair of the subcommittee, just a quick question. This is about DDA, money going to the DDA, and I just want to make sure that we're not restricting money to the DDA. We're just making sure we understand how that money is being spent, because they are drastically underfunded, as we know, just historically, and I just want to make sure we're not going to reduce the amount of money they're getting.
Thank you for that question. We actually are restricting money to DDA for this report on data and how it's being used, but as a restriction, we're not cutting it. We're simply holding it for a short period of time so that the report can be presented to the legislature, and then it would be released. It's not a cut to DDA.
Thank you. I hope that we'll get that report quickly and make sure they get their money, because they need it.
We restrict money from DDA regularly, and it's never been an issue.
All righty. Amendments 38 through 49. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. You may continue, Madam Chair.
In the Department of Human Services, Amendment 50 reduces general funds. Amendment 51 restricts funds for the Maryland Legal Services Program to that purpose. Amendment 52 restricts funding pending a report on hospital stays for youth. Amendment 53 and 54 restrict funds for foster care, maintenance, payments, and child welfare services. Move Amendments 50 through 54.
Any questions on Amendments 50 through 54? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Please continue, Madam Chair.
In the Department of Public Safety and Corrections, Amendments 55 and 56 restrict funds for substance use disorder treatment and restrict funding to maintain operations of the Eastern and Southern Maryland pre-release units. Amendments 57 through 60 restrict funding pending reports. Move Amendments 55 through 60.
Any questions on Amendment 55 through 60? To adopt amendments, all in favor of adoption of 55 through 60, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You may continue.
In age education, Amendment 61 is technical. Amendment 62 restricts funds to be used only for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Amendment 63 clarifies funding for the Concentration of Poverty Schools program. Amendment 64 distributes funding for supplemental instruction contingent on legislation. Amendment 65 authorizes the budget amendment to support certain programs. Amendment 66 through 72 adopt language pertaining to the broadening options and opportunities for students today program and reduce special funds. Move Amendments 61 through 72.
Yes, the gentlelady from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could we pull out Amendments 67 and 68 for some questions and a vote? Thank you.
Okay. Let us adopt Amendments 61 through 66. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You may go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just wondering, I'm looking at 67. What is the problem that we're trying to solve with this amendment? Are we having an issue in the state of Maryland right now with I mean, I see we're making changes
Is this what is known as the BOOST program?
This is about submitting a student handbook for non-public schools, a written policy that they have to submit to MDE to show that they're complying with eligibility requirements. Have we had problems with that?
I will let the subcommittee.
Subcommittee Chair.
Sorry, it's hard to hear back here. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, in Amendment 67,
okay,
it says that now we're going to have our non-public schools submit their student handbooks and written policies related to admissions to MDE. Are we having current issues with that?
We have had issues. We've had some non-public schools outwardly have discrimination within their handbooks. So what we want to make sure is that these handbooks don't have policies that set forth discrimination.
What schools, or what was the policy?
It was a couple years ago. I can't remember, but I'm sure you could find it if you did a quick Google search.
Yeah, I looked. I couldn't find anything in reference to that. So I think some of us might have some issues with the long arm of the government reaching a little too far into our non-public schools.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of what our past experience is, which I think you will find, we want to make sure that in the future and going forward that these non-public schools that are getting state dollars do not adopt discriminatory policies, and that is what this goes toward.
Certainly, I would agree with that. I would be appalled if they were discriminating. I'm just wondering if it's for a hammer looking for a nail, you know what I mean? My other question, I don't know if we should do this amendment first. You want to roll to number 68, or should we take a vote?
It's up to you.
Oh.
You want a roll call?
Yes, I'd like a roll call on this, if we could.
On Amendment 67, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Roll call.
Roll call. Amendment
Madam Speaker?
67. Green
Madam-
vote supports the committee. Clerk, take the call. 98 votes. The amendment passes. 97. Amendment 68.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. So I'm looking at Amendment 68. It seems to sort of piggyback off of what was in 67. And I'm just wondering, again, with all of this, I mean, many of the things mentioned here are people who are already in protected classes. So do our current laws under Title 20 of the state government article not already cover all of this?
Floor Leader.
Yeah, it's a little hard to hear, I'm sorry, but what I'm hearing from you is that you're objecting to similar non-discrimination language in this amendment. And again, this is really annual language that we do to make sure that in all aspects, not only with students, but with teachers and hiring practices, that these non-public schools that are receiving public dollars comply with our public policy, which is that they should not discriminate. So,
yeah, I don't think anybody would disagree with that concept. I'm just wondering if under Title 20 in the state government article, we're already covering that, and this is redundancy. And
well,
is it necessary?
when it comes to discrimination, I'm not afraid to be redundant.
That's a fair answer. Okay, how about this? I see in here you have the words otherwise discriminate, and then you've added gender identity and expression. So, for example, would a Catholic school who had a girls' restroom, if they did not allow genetically male people who identify as female to go into the girls' restroom, would that be considered discrimination under this new code?
I don't know that we're going to play a game of thinking up examples on the fly on the floor. What this does is it's plain language, which it says that these institutions should not discriminate in any regard.
So yes, okay. That's
I did not say yes, I did not say no. I said that
like a yes.
the words have their plain language.
Okay, what about for a sports team?
The words have their plain meaning, delegate.
So I'm going to assume if we're going off of plain meaning, then a Catholic school or a Christian religious school who asked for biologically female girls to be allowed in a biologically female bathroom, they could potentially run afoul of this amendment and lose their funding.
I'm not going to jump into your assumptions. You are free to make any assumptions you choose.
I'm just trying to understand the bill, sir.
Well, I'm not going to read the language to you, but the
I've
language
read it.
has its plain meaning. Do you believe that to be discriminatory or not?
No, I do not.
Well, then you can make the assumptions based on that. I would actually think that that's discriminatory and believe that that would run afoul of this language.
In other areas of the code, however, it clearly states that you, in this section, are not going to be running afoul of the moral and religious beliefs of the school. It states that in already existing language. But if you are forcing private schools to allow biologically male students to change in the restrooms with females, you could very well be violating the code of that school.
I think that it is a violation. I think that you are correct. Let's get down to it. I think that it is discrimination. I think that you are and I are not going to see eye to eye on this. I believe that these schools that are receiving public dollars should not be discriminating against folks on the basis of their gender identity. Absolutely 100%. And if they are discriminating against students based on their gender identity, they should not be receiving public dollars. That is the problem with this non-public program. That is the problem with Boost. That is why this legislature has taken the steps for 3 or 4 consecutive sessions to phase out the program. And frankly, what we're seeing with the Supreme Court and with our federal courts is that at some point we are afraid that they are going to force us to fund discriminators if we keep the program. So you and I clearly don't see eye to eye on this, and that is okay. But this is the policy of the General Assembly, that we will defund these non-public schools who are discriminating, including on the basis of gender identity. So yes.
Okay, what you call discriminating is a little bit different than what I do, and I would say, where's the consent for the women in that? But thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Any other comment? On Amendment 68, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker?
Remember, Green supports the committee. Clerk will take the call.
I got there just in time.
Okay. The amendment passes. Any debate on Amendment 60?
Madam Speaker.
Any debate on Amendment 69 and 70? Okay. Let's vote on Amendment 69 and 70. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? The amendment passes.
Madam Speaker.
Amendment 71, the gentleman from Culver.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to separate Amendment number 71 for discussion and have some questions.
Yes,
If I
that's
may,
why I was
before
calling on you.
I appreciate that, Madam Speaker. So I'm curious, what does this particular committee amendment number 71 do?
I'll defer to the chair of the committee.
Yeah, it basically is the same position we've had for the last 2 years, where we're saying that the Boost program should not accept any new students, retain, as a matter of fact, existing students and siblings of those existing students. This is the language we adopted last year, and I believe the year before, which basically says that over a period of 12 years, the Boost program will continue to operate at a reduced rate, and at the end of 12 years, we believe will be ended.
And how many children are in the program now?
No. Not the children that are in the program. Okay?
How many children are funded by Boost? Their tuitions, in part. Do we know?
I do not know. 1,400.
Okay. And do we know how many are in the waiting list?
No waiting list.
Okay. And who administers Boost?
Well, there's actually a group that's appointed that every year meets and they administer Boost. They go over, how many schools, if there's been discrimination, so on and so forth, and make a determination based on the appropriation.
Is this is it the Maryland State Department of Education ultimately that administers it? Because I'm not
They
actually
come
sure.
under that.
Say again, my apologies.
That board comes under that.
The board comes under them, so ultimately they're responsible. Okay, and I'm just curious, why are we doing this in the budget rather than putting a bill in that actually intends to, what appears to me at least, be to sunset Boost?
Because Boost, as a program, was created in the budget, not a bill.
And actually, I'm not sure if that's the case or not. I'll take your word for it. But it just seems like every year we have children coming up from Baltimore and other parts of the state, and they advocate for Boost funding. Obviously, they couldn't really last year, although I think some did prior to the pandemic, and this year they're not able to weigh in. Just seems like it would be better to have this in a bill as opposed to in the budget so that people would have an opportunity to actually weigh in and talk about why it's important to them.
I believe that any bill, all bills introduced on this subject area may be wrong, failed, and this was actually introduced in the budget as a compromise.
Got it. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Good. Thank you. I know on the amendment.
On the
Madam
amendment.
Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I did do some research, and there are 2,500 children that are currently using Boost. And the Boost program is a program that helps children attend schools that are non-public schools. Let's be clear. That's what it does. And there are 2,500 children in the program, and there are 1,300 children on the waiting list. I suspect if more children knew that it was available, there'd be thousands and thousands on the waiting list. I have no doubt. But this amendment seeks to limit Boost funding only to those children who are already in the Boost program and their siblings. No one else. No one else is allowed, because once those children that are in the system matriculate through kindergarten, middle school, high school, and graduate, the program expires. That's what this amendment essentially does, amendment number 71. And I have to tell you, I can't understand why something so important wouldn't be put in a bill as opposed to an amendment to the budget, because there are so many thousands of children who could benefit from this program and from programs like it, but certainly from this program, because there have been thousands of children who have benefited from it already. 55% of the children using Boost are minorities. All are on free and reduced meal programs. These are the poorest of the poor and the worst of the worst schools. And we know, and I can say this, and I say this, and I want you to know why I say it. I don't say it because I'm happy, because I'm from there. We know that 83% of the schools in Baltimore City are failed schools by MSDE standards. And yet, funding has been record funded for 20 years. I think either the third, depending on where you read, the third highest per pupil spending or the fifth highest in the United States. And the results are abysmal. In fact, there's an article that just came out that states that a Baltimore high school student fails all but 3 classes, only passed 3 classes over 4 years, and still ranks near top of his class, and somehow managed to move forward. What kind of a future does a child have in a public school system that is so fundamentally broken? Yet, fully funded, high funded, third highest or fifth highest funded per pupil in the United States. And then another article really caught my eye, because I'm from Baltimore, My grandfather knew Nancy Pelosi's father. They were friends. And I thought it was fascinating when I read in the Baltimore Sun by Pamela Wood, a very well-written article, mind you. Maryland's oldest Catholic girls' school, Institute of Notre Dame, announces closing. It's a school that is so famous and so much part of our history that at one point during the Civil War, the students in this school could hear the cannon fire. Unbelievable story. Unbelievable history. Unbelievable, great private school education. Nancy Pelosi attended that school. So did Barbara Mikulski. And Nancy Pelosi talked about what a great time she had at the school, and what a great education she had at the school. But here is one of the most powerful people in the world who didn't step up to keep the school open and could have done so in the United States Congress. We have an opportunity with Boost to not just try to end a program that's positive, but to fully fund it and expand it. And why wouldn't we expand it? Because in Baltimore City, and there are other places too in the state, to be fair, but in Baltimore City, including the school that I went to, right on the city line, Lansdowne High School, right across Patapsco Avenue from Cherry Hill, is a failed school. And so many children would have an opportunity to get up and out. And I can't understand for the life of me why anyone would think it's okay to get rid of this program. And I know the floor leader is going to say, well, because this school or that school is discriminating or whatever. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, these are platitudes, right? But here's the thing. There was a time in this state when the Democrat Party actually engaged in critical thinking skills and was pragmatic and did what was pragmatic. We must do what's pragmatic, not what's perfect in public education and private education. We must do what works. And the Baltimore City public school system doesn't work. And I've said before, Madam Speaker, and I'm going to say it again, it requires a Republican to get up and talk about this, especially one who went to one of those schools. God knows I only got up and out because of my parents. That was the only reason. But I will say this. The children of Baltimore deserve so much better than this amendment. This is the opportunity to go to a private school when your public school has failed is, in my opinion, the civil rights issue of our time. And I'm so proud to be part of the Party of Lincoln and saying that on this floor. It needs to get done. How shameful it must be to be so one-dimensional that the only way you can think is to fund public schools, even those that are failed, knowing that another generation is going to be just thrown aside. So, Madam Speaker, I rise to oppose this amendment. There's nothing else I can say about that.
Gentlelady from Baltimore City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise as the mother of a Baltimore City public school student to tell my colleagues that the Baltimore City public school system is not failing. It is every day teachers show up in our Baltimore City public schools and they do absolutely everything that they could to help our children. Every principal in every school in Baltimore City now is doing everything they can. Is it a perfect school system? No, it's not a perfect school system. Does it have record funding? No, it doesn't have record funding. That's why we just overrode the governor's veto a few weeks ago to make sure that it does have the funding that it needs. I also happen to have attended a Catholic school when I was younger, when I lived in Washington, D.C., St. Anne's Academy on Tenley Circle. That school's closed now. And you know what? It's closed because it couldn't make the numbers work. And I got a great education there, but I would not want the DC government or any government to be paying to send money to that school or any Catholic school, even though I'm a practicing Catholic, because public dollars belong in public institutions. And so as a Baltimore City public school parent, I am very proud to support this amendment and to support our public school system in getting better each and every day. Thank you.
Gentleman from Baltimore County in the annex on this amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd ask for your grace because this is very personal. My wife works for a Catholic school. It's Cardinal Sheehan. These kids are her kids. Let's take a step back and let's think about the kids. These kids are struggling. The hardships that we hear that with these children, what's happening and what's happening in the school. We have to look and think about the children. My wife knows each one of these children's names. 400 different kids. You have to pardon me. The reason why this is so close to my heart is because I see how hard my wife works. It's not a job. It's her ministry. You have to pardon me. It's just very emotional. To see the outcome and hear some of the stories come from my wife, I wish she could be here today. It's just unbelievable. And I would ask that we continue to fund Boost and to help other kids continue to be able to attend these schools. And they're not Catholic, they're Baptist. There's all denominations, and it's not just Catholics. These kids are amazing. Some of the stories I hear, father threw the mother out. The mother's out on the street, but yet she wants to make sure her kid can go to Catholic or go to the school. It's just story after story. And for this reason, I'm standing here today. If you look at some of the students that's come out of there and some of the things that they've achieved, we have a football player that played for the Ravens. I believe it was the Ravens. They come out of Cardinal Sheehan. And has anyone heard the choir? The choir has been all over this country. Well, I'm going to say they have. They've been to New York. They've been on TV. And, the music program they have here is just amazing. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's almost 99% of the children continue to go on to college. And this is not, and I just want to make sure, this is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democrat issue. This is about the kids. And whatever we do today, I just want to make sure that however you vote, we vote with the children. And we're not trying to take money from the city. I'm not going to get into that argument. It's because we have children come from all over that go there. Grandmothers, grandfathers, mothers, aunts, uncles bring their kids there. Anyway, I hope that you can understand where it's coming from. It's coming from my heart. And I would ask you today, to please consider, before defunding Boost or stopping any further, them be able to get more children, please consider the outcome. please visit the school. I think the madam, well, I don't want you the delegate's name, has been there. There have been several, a couple of senators too. So this is a well-known school, and this is just one of many that's doing great works. And again, I just ask you to consider the kids. Let's not make it political. Let's not make it, their side and our side. It's about the kids. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Prince George's County in the annex on this amendment.
Oh man, give me a round of applause. Good job. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to address this, the amendment. And for years, I couldn't believe I just heard that we're going to take the funding from this. Can the floor leader on this one answer a quick question?
Floor leader.
Sure.
How much money is currently in the Boost program?
I think it came in at around $9 million. $9
million?
Around there. I think that's the way it came in.
Thank
But
you.
it's gone out in
Thank
the
you.
last 2 or 3 years.
Thank you.
It's gone out at about $4.55 million.
Yep.
So this action has been pretty consistent in the last 2 or 3 years with the action taken in the House.
Thank you. 4.5 million, $9 million. I represent a county where we have a school system that's over $1 billion. I've talked to my constituents and told them it's our job up here as delegates to bring as much school funding back to our schools as possible. I don't question anybody in the General Assembly on that. We want to go make a difference in our public school system. However, I'll tell you a story that touched me years ago, and it's always stuck with me. And that's why I'm going to be voting against this amendment. I have a school in my district, a woman in my district. She lost her oldest son to gang violence. And she said she applied for her younger son to get into a school. In Prince George's County, we don't have school choice. You got to go to your schools and your boundaries. She applied for him to go to a specialty school. The younger son did not get in. She came to my office and said, Delegate Walker, I'm not losing another kid to these streets. If I send him to that same school where his brother got shot, what do you think will happen? I had no answer for it all. She doesn't make a high income, so she was applying for her youngest son to go to a school called St. Columba, which has an alumnus that's among the delegates here. St. Columba is not this luxurious private school with great buildings and facilities. The private schools that we have in Prince George's County, most of them don't look as nice as the public schools. She could not afford to pay for this private school because the private schools have run out of the money for the financial aid. So what do I tell her when she's just trying to save her kid? It's not about discrimination. It's about safety. It was about the neighborhood. And we all try to say, let's get the simple answer is, well, if our public schools are all up to par, we won't even have to worry about this. But the reality is they're not. And public schools aren't for everybody. And it should not be determined if we can help out students in the state of Maryland whose parents don't have the means to get them what they think as a parent is going to be a different education. The kid that lives across the street from me that goes to a private school, guess what? He's still my kid in my district. His parents are still my constituents. Why do we ignore that? They pay their taxes. They pay their taxes. Because they go to a different school, we're going to discriminate against them because their parents are sending them to a different school or because they make a different choice, and we're going to make them the bad guy over $5 to $9 million? Come on, get real. This is an attack. It should have had a hearing. It should not be done in this form, in this format. So on behalf of the folks that I represent and that woman who I made that promise to, I'm rejecting this amendment. Step up, be a man.
Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted
On
to
this amendment.
On this amendment, absolutely. I wanted to share a brief story that I think is very relevant. Shortly after I was elected, myself, my wife, and a couple friends, we used to go to a bar and restaurant in the city called Sticky Rice. They served freezer food and overpriced beer and had video game art, and for a yuppie like me, it's just too much to resist. One day we were joined by a friend of a friend. She was a Baltimore City school teacher. And, we're having a couple drinks, having a great conversation, and she started to become very frank about some of the problems in Baltimore City schools. And I was recently elected, so we struck up a conversation, and we really got into the nitty-gritty of the problems that she saw. And, of course, it was the discipline issues, some real egregious sexual infractions, but I always remember that she said, the real problem that bugs me is that the school system is just passing these kids through. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? How does the school system just pass kids through? If they're not ready to graduate, what's going on? And she said there's a real problem with the school system just fixing kids' grades to make sure they move on. Several years later, local news had got a report from a teacher in the Baltimore City school system that there was a chronic grade-fixing issue, a scandal. Fox News sent a PIA request to get information about it. The city school system refused. Fox News sued and won. And they've got multiple reports from teachers all over Baltimore City about a systemic issue of grade fixing. That girl, let me be clear here, this young girl who was a teacher in the Baltimore City school system was anything but a flaming conservative. She was clearly enamored with these kids. And she said the biggest chronic problem we have is that we're just passing these kids through. What do you say about a school system? Here's the quote she gave me. These kids don't even know their letters and numbers. I have 9th grade students that I teach that don't know their letters and numbers. The gentleman from Culvert is absolutely right. This is the civil rights issue of our generation. We have this problem in Baltimore County now. We have grade fixing issues in Baltimore County. What are these students supposed to do who are stuck in a completely toxic situation? These students are the ones that are asking for these funds. If you're in a successful school, you're not asking for access to Boost. If you talk to these students, talk to people. They will tell you why they are accessing these funds. These are parents and students who don't have any hope. They're in a school, they have problems, they're not satisfied, and they need another solution. And you see this passion, frankly, from people on both sides of the aisle already. I think people understand the value of these funds. And what are we telling people with this amendment? What are we saying to these people who have a solution that works for them and the people behind them who need the same solution? We're saying, screw you. If you're stuck in your school and you have a problem and you have a toxic situation, screw you. I think that is just despicable. I think it's absolutely despicable. The gentleman from Calvert is right, and I support him on this amendment today.
Gentlelady from Carroll in the annex on this amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was really moved by the speaking of two of my colleagues over here out in the hinterlands and the annex. And a lot of the talking that we've been doing this year, that we've heard over and over, what is the moral thing to do? Since January, in our committees, here on the floor, We have been told, what is the moral thing to do? So I'm here tonight to speak to what I think is the moral thing to do. There has been, since I've been in office here with my colleagues, many of them, a target on the boost funding. We've heard it year after year after year. We hear about, oh, too much funding, that's too expensive, year after year after year. Then we pass an education bill that's supposed to be for all of our children, to the tune of billions of dollars, billions, because we care about our children. I agree. I care about all of our children. I have 4 myself. It is, to me, completely immoral to sunset these funds and to cut off children in the future from having the opportunity for the basic need of education. I have learned so much in my years of sitting on Ways and Means and talking and discussing and debating many educational issues. But I have never understood why we would tell children and their families who desperately want their children to have the same chance of every other child in this state for a decent and safe education in the place of their choice. I was so moved by the delegate from Baltimore County because he has spoken to me many, many times about his wife and her love of the children that she teaches. She knows every single child's name that are in that school under the Boost program. Every single child. We talk about thousands and thousands and thousands of children. These are faces and families that matter. They all matter. It is just immoral to me that we would do this. I just really, truly feel that if we're willing to spend billions for future children, because we're not doing Kerwin tomorrow, we're not doing the blueprint tomorrow. There are kids today, next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, that need our help, and this helps them. Please don't turn your backs on them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is there any further debate?
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Floor Leader.
Yep, just quickly, Madam Speaker, a couple points to just clarify. First, to the good gentleman from Calvert County. The reason this is being done in the budget is because that's how the governor created it. You know, you may be right. Really, maybe what we should do is zero this program out, and you can put a bill in that goes in Ways and Means to create a program. That is probably the way the program should be created. And I would be wholeheartedly in support of that. And they could debate the bill in the Ways and Means Committee, and if the program is passed, it will be funded. For now, this is the way the governor's created it. And this is the way the legislature's opportunity to put their stamp on it. Look, to the good gentleman from Prince George's County, remember, the student you're talking about, they will stay in the program. We are doing this compassionately. We are not throwing any students out of this program. We understand, though we may have disdain for the program, it is not the students that are currently in the program's fault. They should, and their siblings should, be able to stay and matriculate through the program. So we want to be clear on that. But look, on the overarching issue, I guess I have to admit, I don't have all the answers standing here. I don't. And I hear a lot about inadequate, failing schools and, you know, passing people through the system, as the gentleman from Baltimore County said. But, you know, I wish we had heard that passion a few weeks ago when we had the blueprint to create excellent schools in this state. All I heard during that debate is that we can't afford it. But isn't it a little ironic that those same folks think we can afford this, funding private schools? We can't afford to fund our public schools and create a revolutionary program for our public school children, but we sure as heck can afford to fund these private schools, I guess. Not for me. Look, the evidence is clear, what we've seen in other states with these voucher programs. They do not work. They do not lift all sails. They simply do not. These voucher programs drain money away from our public schools, and they create two caste systems. That is the facts. So, yes, this is the House position. This has been our position for the last 2 or 3 years. We are going to do it compassionately, but we're going to make sure we prioritize our public schools and our public school dollars, because what happens with a $5 million program, it becomes a $10 million program, it becomes a $20 million program, and next thing you know, we're Florida with $400 million being diverted from our public schools. I urge you to support the committee.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Culver.
Madam Speaker, I do appreciate that. I just wanted to rebut one of the comments the floor leader just mentioned, and that is best person to hear about this issue of the public dollars is Thomas Sowell. And Thomas Sowell couldn't have said it better when he said, the argument on the left about the money in public schools is that you're taking money away from public schools and sending them to private schools. When in fact, if you were already in a public school in Maryland and you change from one public school district like Baltimore City to another in Howard County, the money follows the student. Just like the money would follow the student to a private school. And we know, not to belabor the point, but we know the outcomes in these areas like Baltimore City. And the idea that the blueprint is going to fix that after 20 years of the other experiment that has failed in the city, we know it's time to try something new. I know the gentleman, the floor leader, he knows me. I'm a pragmatist when it comes to these things. So, and hear me out. I have 3 children. 2 went to private school, and 1 went to public school. It wasn't for all of them, either way. Every child is different. They learn differently. And if I had a child in Baltimore City, and I had $20,000 to send my child somewhere, and I could give that child an opportunity, I might even send them to, I don't know, a boarding school somewhere to get out of the neighborhood, to have an opportunity. Not just to go to school, but to be safe. Kirwan doesn't fix that. And you know that. Kirwan doesn't make the community safer. It's so foundationally broken that it takes us on our side of the aisle to speak up about it. And I'm passionate about it, just like my friend from Baltimore County and my other friend here from Baltimore County, because I was one of those poor kids. Yes, I was. And I don't want to see another generation lost. And for all those reasons, I'm voting against this amendment.
Gentleman from Talbot.
Thank you, Speaker. I'll be quick, and I have not heard this. I know a lot of the discussion's been about Baltimore City. My district on the shore, we're very different. And my district in particular, I've had people make fun of it, called a lily white Republican district, the most lily white Republican district in the state. They've said things like that. And we have gaps in our society. And I tell you, this program is fundamental. It's absolutely fundamental to the future of a lot of kids in our district. And they would be blown away that we were talking about ending this program. And I heard the word disdain for the program. I just heard that. And I just think it's so hypocritical right now when we stand here and all these kids in private school have been going to school every day without a problem. And all of us parents with kids in public school have gone through absolute hell. It's unbelievable to me.
Madam Speaker.
Chair of the committee.
Thank you. I've been taking notes, and I'm going to invite every person who stood up and talked about the Baltimore City Schools to come visit a school with me in the next year. I want you to watch teachers who, they know their students' names. They do. And they're working very hard to educate kids who come from sometimes the most devastating situations. The most devastating situations. I, for one, came here, and I believe I should uphold the Constitution of this state. And the Constitution of this state says that we should, and this is in the first page or paragraph, that the Maryland General Assembly shall establish a system of free public schools and shall provide the taxation for their maintenance. That's our first charge. That's what our forefathers and mothers said we must do. And by the way, when you come to Baltimore City and visit a school with me, because I'm going to invite every one of you that stood up, those of you in the annex, those of you on the floor, I want you to see a school in Baltimore City at work. I'm going to take you the same way I come to Annapolis every time I leave my house. And we're going to go across Coldstream Lake, and we're going to look at that sign that stands there in front of Polly Western. Chairman of Judiciary, you can take a bow. And this is what it says. Polly Western Technical School, one of the top 25 STEM schools in the country. In the country. You know, that's not a failing school, and the kids who get there, who go through elementary school and go through, junior high school and get into Poly and get into our high schools, they're not just playing around. They're reaching for a way out in many cases of their situation. So, we debated a lot of what we heard here tonight in the Kerwin Blueprint bill. But I'm a Baltimore City school teacher. I taught those children. I knew every name. Thank you.
The gentleman in the annex from Western Maryland on this amendment.
Good evening, colleagues. I didn't want to speak at all. I heard the gentleman from Prince George's County give an impassioned speech about a neighbor of his and how he really cared and wanted that person to have a great education. I wanted the debate to end right there. That was all that needed to be said. But a lot more has been said since then. I hear that Baltimore City schools are so great. Well, why is it that in Baltimore City, their average math proficiency score in 2021 is 18%? I mean, what a disgrace, 18%? And then we can talk about other statistics like their reading scores. I mean, it's just dismal, dismal, dismal. And we've given the public schools in this state a full course meal, one of the best meals you could get. And just this next year, it's going to be $4 billion. And this amendment, all we're asking for is $8 million. But let's compare what that means. We're asking for 8 cents. And just this next year with Kerwin, we spent $200. So 8 cents, $200. Crumbs, full course meal, one of the best you could ever have. I don't spend that much on a meal. Why can't we just go ahead and give the kids the crumbs? I mean, come on. These people, the boost money goes to the child. There's a waiting list, and it's full. We could at least give them some crumbs off the table. Thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Green supports the committee. Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker. Just give me a second.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County to explain his vote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Briefly to explain my vote, I think we should think about this amendment and every other thing we do in this body the same way. I think we should think about it like this. Is what we're doing cutting off opportunities for our children and future generations? Are we cutting off the same opportunities that we had? I come from a family of steel. My father's father by blood was a steel worker. My father's father by marriage was a steel worker. My mother's father was a steel worker. My father, my uncle was steel workers. I was a steel worker. Do I want my son to be a steel worker? Hell no. But I want him to have the opportunity just in case he ever needed it. And I think we should think about this the same exact way. Children up until now have had an opportunity to get out of toxic situations. And what we're saying today is we're going to cut you off from that. That is our decision. That's why I'm voting no today.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment passes. Amendment number 72. Gentlelady from Hagerstown in the annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Forgive me if I do this in error, but I'd like to request pull out amendment number 72 for discussion.
Go right ahead.
So there's been some very meaty discussions so far, very, very interesting discussions that we are having involving the education of our children here in Maryland. And more specifically, our very disadvantaged children who live in school districts that are struggling, but at no fault of their own. So colleagues, I rise in opposition of this amendment as I support fully funding the BOOST program. As the gentleman from Southern Maryland pointed out in the last amendment, and for reasons that I cannot fathom, the Appropriations Committee has, with their budget actions, fundamentally put a sunset on this program that benefits some of our most neediest students. The BOOST program isn't about competition between public and private schools. It's about supporting all forms of education. Traditional public schools, public charter schools, private schools, whatever works for our children should be what we advocate for. Who are the recipients of these scholarships for the 2021 school year? As my colleague, Delegate Fisher, has already stated, and it's worth reiterating.
Do not use a member's name, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. There are over 2,500 recipients with more than 1,300 students on a waiting list. The average household of income of these students is $35,612. The largest number of recipients, nearly 40%, reside in Baltimore City. 55% of recipients are minority students. Nearly 950 students are English language learners. 100% of these recipients qualify for free and reduced meals programs, with the majority of them qualifying for free meals. Students with the lowest incomes are served first, and special ed students receive additional scholarship funding. Again, many of you know, you already know, I've said this before, I'm the new kid on the block here. But I thought we were supposed to help those in need, particularly children. That is what the BOOST program does. It gives lower income families who have children trapped in failing schools an option to make their children's lives better. It was the great Republican and great Marylander, Frederick Douglass, who says, education means emancipation. It means light and liberty. It means the uplifting of the soul of man into the glorious light of truth, the light by which men can only be made free. To Frederick Douglass, education equaled freedom, and I believe that it is as true today as it was when he delivered the speech back in 1894. It can be a way out. It can break cycles of poverty. It can break cycles of crime. Boost is working. If it wasn't working, there wouldn't be a waiting list. Why would we take away someone's chance for a quality education? Why would we steal this opportunity from those who need it most? My friends, I urge a red vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Any other comment? Floor leader?
This amendment is just related to the last amendment. They're related to one another, so we've had the debate. It's the same, essentially the same amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Western Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We've heard a lot from everybody about where they went to school and what they did and what happened to them, and so here's my 2 minutes. I am the first person in the history of my family, my father's family, the Buckles, my mother's family, the Walkers, the first person ever to go to private school. We aren't Catholic, none of us. I'm not Catholic. I've never been Catholic. I don't think anyone in my family, other than maybe a couple of folks through marriage, married into Catholic families, are active practitioners of the Catholic faith. I grew up not in Baltimore City, and I didn't grow up in poverty either. My grandfather was a coal miner. My other grandfather was a truck driver. My mother had 12 brothers and sisters. Again, none of them went to private school. In fact, none of them went to college. In fact, her oldest siblings didn't complete high school. They went to work in a coal mine when they were 14 or 15 years old. But for me, where I grew up, in Allegheny County, Maryland, there was a school system. It was a parochial school system. It wasn't a Tony, rich, elitist school system. It was a parochial school system. It's where that gentleman in that big picture up there behind the speaker, the former speaker of this body, it's the same school system where he went to school. It's where two of our colleagues who sit in this room, members of the majority party, they went to that same school system that I went to for periods of their education growing up in Allegheny County. And when I was in the 8th grade, some folks came to my mother, who was a single mother, and I went to a middle school that certainly wasn't a tough school. It's not the kind of schools that people are talking about, the kind of neighborhoods that people are talking about that may exist in other parts of our state. But, we had some tough kids. I played middle school sports, basketball, football with a few guys who I was pretty good friends with, who I can tell you today have spent the majority of their adulthood in prison. They made mistakes. They didn't have good family lives, and they were tough. They were my friends when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. And some folks came to my mother, who, again, was a single mother, who at the time was putting herself through college. And they came to her and they said, hey, we want Jason for some certain reasons. I know you wouldn't believe it. I know my good friend from Prince George's County, the head of the Black Caucus, who has the sweetest jump shot in the House of Delegates. He would not believe that not the fellow over in the annex, the fellow over there. He wouldn't believe this, but when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, I wasn't quite as round about as what I am now, but I was about the same height. So, I was a pretty decent athlete, and they said, we want you to come to Bishop Walsh. And my mother very much wanted me to go to Bishop Walsh because she believed that the education, not just the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s education, but the environment that it provided would set me on the right path. And I was extremely resistant and hesitant. I didn't want to go. We thought that those kids who went there were the rich kids. They were the different kids. They were the all-Catholic kids. It was all about being Catholic. And I was just a public school kid from Allegheny County who liked to play sports. That was it. And I went there and I found out that none of that was true. That a lot of the kids who went there were from lower income families, from middle class families, and there was a lot of charity and there were a lot of scholarships and there was a lot of hope that went into that school. There were some rich kids, no question. But it was a fundamental experience in my life. It was a turning point experience in my life. And when I moved back to Allegheny County, I stayed involved and got involved with the school. And I can tell you this, that little school, that little parochial school in a small town in Western Maryland, makes a tremendous impact upon families there. There are kids who go to that school today. They're not coming from the major urban centers, but they're kids who really honestly wouldn't get much attention in the normal setting of public schools. The Allegheny County Public Schools, my colleague, my friend from Prince George's County talked about having $1 billion budget. I think we have 100-odd million. We're not rich. We're poor. I come here every year. I talk to you. I wish to God in heaven, I wish that we weren't so poor, that we weren't so behind, and I didn't feel like I had to beg some of you, all of you, to help us. It's not where I want to be. That's not my native approach. But we're a poor county. And the Boost program, I know for a fact, provides opportunities for lower middle class kids, for kids from broken homes, for kids where the dad works all day long driving a coal truck, just trying to make enough money. The mom's maybe not there, and he wants that education. He wants that connection. There's nothing wrong with our public schools. I'm not talking about defunding our public schools at all. I'm talking about allowing just a little bit of help. Just a little bit of help. How much money have we sloshed around in this legislature in the last 3 or 4 weeks? And I'm glad we did. I don't know how we're all going to pay for it when the dime comes due at some point. But we have moved billions and billions and billions of dollars around in the last few weeks. And this amendment talks about just leave the money in Governor Hogan's budget that he put in the budget. We have the money. It's a good program. It's not perfect. It's a good program that helps good people for the right reasons. Just leave the money there. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
No. Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker?
Clerk will take the call. The amendment passes. Madam Chair.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Interagency Commission, this is beginning with 73, Amendment 73, and 74 require report and restrict funds used only to fill vacancy positions. Amendment 75, 76 restrict funds pending a report on the Center of Urban Health Equity. Amendment 77 in the Department of Environment restricts funds pending submission of the Maryland Scrap Tire Annual Report. Amendment 78 in the Department of Juvenile Services restricts funds pending an update on the Baltimore City Strategic Partnership. And in the State Reserve Fund, Amendment 79 restricts a portion of the open space program repayment specifically for parks maintenance. Amendments 80 and 81 reduce deficiency appropriations and Medicaid based on federal fund availability and expenditure trends. Move adoptions of Amendment 73 through 81.
Are there any questions on Amendments 73 through 81? Hearing none, calling for the adoption of Amendments 73 through 81. Move on through. Next section. Oh,
We're going to take a vote.
switch it on the board. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment's passed. Madam Chair.
Thank you. The Department of Human Resources, Amendment 82, deletes an unneeded discrepancy appropriation. Amendment 83 increases reduction for the Maryland Technology Development Corporation. Amendment 84 amends language related to funds placed in a contingency reserve. Amendment 85 amends annual language restricting transfers of funds of certain sub-objects. Amendment 86 through 88 restrict funds pending reports. Amendment 89 and 90 are annual language concerning long-term forecasts and across-the-board reductions. Move the adoption of amendments 82 through 90.
Any questions on amendments 82 through 90? All in favor of amendments 82 through 90 signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Continue, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment 91 through 92 pertain to federal funds. Amendments 93 and 94 are annual language requiring organizational charts and report on interagency agreements. Amendment 95 defines the budget process, amendment process. Amendments 96 and 97 add language on spending in certain programs and workers' compensation payments. Amendment 98 through 100 limit the creation of new positions and add reporting language and other restrictions on those positions. Move the adoptions of amendments 91 through 100.
Any questions on amendments 91 through 100? Okay. All in favor of amendments 91 through 100 signify by saying aye. Opposed? May go for it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Amendment number 101 requires a report on employee health insurance. Amendment 102 authorizes the use of funds for workers' compensation settlement. Amendment 103 and through 111 restrict funds pending reports. Move the adoption of amendments 101 through 111.
Any questions on amendments 101 through 111? All in favor of amendments 101 through 111 signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Continue, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Amendment 112 restricts funds to be used for operations of the Maryland Transit Administration. Amendment 113 is technical. Amendment 114 through 112 relate to the use of Blueprint for Maryland's future fund support for reopening schools, addressing learning loss, student trauma and behavioral health, in-person learning, and concentration of poverty grants. Amendment 121 restricts foster care maintenance payments to that purpose. Amendment 122 restricts funds for the Maryland Stem Cell Research Fund.
Okay, gentlemen from Cecil in the annex.
Madam Speaker, I need to say move the adoption of amendments 112 through 122.
The gentleman from Cecil in the annex on these amendments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to pull out 122 if I could.
Any debate on 112 through 121?
122, no, I do not have any debate on those.
I was addressing it to the body. Okay. Okay, gentlemen, you can go through 122.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Hold on a second. All in favor of amendments 112 through 121 signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Okay. Gentlemen for amendment 122.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just had a few questions on where the funds actually go, if the floor leader could yield for a question.
Sure.
So it's my understanding that some or all of these funds goes to the Maryland Stem Cell Research Fund. That's correct?
That's correct. 7.2 million reduced from 8.2 million in the current fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, I just hopped online here and took a look at their 2020 annual report, and I noticed that there was multiple references made to human embryonic cell research. Is that accurate? Is that under the realm of their purview?
Well, I will say to you that the existing language that created this program allowed for human embryonic stem cell. However, the awards in the last year, basically we have 22, 23, 24, 26 awards. 2 of them used embryonic tissue. But what's important for the legislature to understand is that that embryonic tissue that is referred to is embryonic cell lines currently being used that have already been approved and are existing lines. There have not been any new lines that have been created. These lines were created in 1998 and 2001. And what I have gleaned from both the University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins today, who are the recipients of much of this, is that there is a really pretty radical shift away from the use of embryonic cells.
Yeah, that is correct, Madam Floor Leader, and thank you for that background. I would just add to that, as this field of research advances, there is movement currently towards using adult stem cells as well as induced pluripotent stem cells, or IPS. In terms of the embryonic stem cells, there's a couple downsides that I wanted to just, for the edification of the body. They have to be harvested from women. They require destruction of the fertilized cell. There's chain of custody issues. And the final product that's generated from this research, when it's used in another person, can oftentimes be rejected. Additionally, at the point of injection, it can oftentimes cause tumors as another way of the body rejecting these cells. Now, I understand that in years past, especially as this field was emerging, that these were the most easily manipulated cells. And they kind of, no pun intended, gave birth to this area of research. However, there are better ways to do this. The adult stem cells can be manipulated and are found in the body. Scientists don't know why exactly they got there, but they have the ability to be induced into different cells, and that is the forefront of the technology now. In terms of the ethical debate, there are review boards, and Johns Hopkins actually has members that sit on that review board that's internationally accredited to go over the ethics of this type of research. However, that is an industry that's regulating itself from an ethical standpoint. I'd like to ask that we vote against this amendment, only because that report that we just referenced does have numerous, and you can do a keyword search, roughly 17 instances where it refers to embryonic cell research. Most of this data that I gleaned came from the University of Nebraska Medical Center. And for that purpose, I'd like to ask the body vote against this amendment. I will be offering an amendment later. But earlier, this body voted against testing on animals. And what I will say is that that was an ethical decision. We made that based on the fact that even though we can test on animals and we can glean research from that, we decided from an ethical standpoint that that wasn't the route to go. And for that reason, I'm asking this body, if you see this in the same light, to vote against this line 122. And for that reason, I'd ask for a red vote. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam
Committee
Speaker.
Chair.
Yeah. And I think my friend, the delegate who just spoke, is absolutely right. We've been moving away from the use of embryonic stem cells because we have found out in recent years that adult stem cells can be manipulated as easily as embryonic. And in my research today and talking to University of Maryland and Hopkins, very few researchers are using those stem cells. Those stem cells were generated, created post-2001. And they have not had any new generation of embryonic stem cells at that time. But I think it's important to talk about the use of stem cells. I think it's really important for folks here on the floor to hear what stem cells have done. probably the most important headline I've read in recent years is that sickle cell anemia, sickle cell, the disease that we had so few ways to address. One was chemotherapy. We found now that there is hope for patients' cure, complete cure with sickle cell disease through stem cell transplantation. And they can do it without chemotherapy. They started with children, they're now moving into adults. Adults are having significant benefits. Any of you on the floor who know someone with heart failure, pulmonary disease, cancer infections, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, ALS, I could go on and on. The research being done in this country right now to find cures uses stem cells. And everybody's made a little personal story. I'm going to tell a little personal story. Those of you who know me know that I lost a sister several years ago. She died as a result of just the ravage of diabetes. And her first and probably the most traumatic impact to her quality of life was when she called me. I'm here on the floor, and she's in the car with my brother on the way to Mercy Hospital. She'd lost over 50% of her eyesight. Stem cells is now reversing that impact with people who have diabetes. I mean, she read a book a day, I swear. And if she could have gotten any part of her eyesight back, I will tell you her quality of life would have been improved immensely. And then, many of you know that wonderful 94-year-old mother of mine has had issues with memory recently. There's hope for her because of the work that's being done in dementia and Alzheimer's and other areas. There's hope for her. And so I would ask you all to reject this and support the work of the committee. This is a very small portion of our budget. It has actually declined greatly over the years, I'm sad to say. But I will tell you how important this work is for everybody on this floor. Thank you.
On the amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Cecil.
Thank you. And I do appreciate the story that the good floor leader just shared. The reason I'm asking for a red vote on this is because I will be coming back later with an amendment just to restrict the research that's done with these cells. I do feel that this is a noteworthy and probably should be funded more in the grand scheme of things. However, that consensus that both myself and the floor leader have on what would lead to positive results without the ethical concerns is really the direction of striking this amendment and then add a new language with the same funding. So I would still ask for a red vote, and I appreciate the time to speak on this matter. Thank you.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no.
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the call. The amendment passes. Question now is the adoption of the Fable report. Recognizing the committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the adoption of the FY22 budget for the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? I think the ayes have it. Are there any other amendments to the bill or to its title? Not?
Gentleman from Western Maryland, I think he's in the annex.
The
has
gentleman from Washington County in the annex. We got this, okay?
I do have an amendment at the desk. It is 643926/1.
Amendment number 1.
So each year, the Center for Disease Control requests abortion data from the central health agencies for 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the City of New York. In 2018, the latest year available, 49 reporting areas did provide this information to the CDC. The states of California, Maryland, and New Hampshire were noticeably absent and have not reported abortion data to the CDC. This amendment would not expend $100,000 to the Maryland Department of Health until this department has issued a report that provides abortion data regarding abortions performed in the state for calendar year 2021. The amendment specifically states that the report shall not include any personally identifiable information that could be used to identify either the patient or the physician. Funds would revert to the general fund if the report is not provided, and I move the amendment.
Subcommittee Chair, Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would ask the body to reject this amendment. I appreciate the delegates offering it. I wish I had seen it in advance. I believe it was provided to the committee, but I didn't have a chance to see the details. This data is not necessary. The information that is being requested would only apply to the Medicaid budget, and the Medicaid, we are answerable to CMS, not to the CDC with regard to the Medicaid budget. They don't want this data from us. They don't want this information from us. They've never asked. And some of the information that's actually requested, I believe in the amendment, is difficult, if not impossible, to actually ascertain. So as it is not necessary and it has not been requested, I would ask that we reject this amendment. It would delay the Department of Health's ability to do their job. It would take valuable resources away from their work to be able to gather this data, and in some cases they wouldn't even be able to be compliant because some of this data is not possible to get. So I would ask the body to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
The maker of the amendment.
I thank you for that response, but I find it amazing that 49 other jurisdictions can provide this information to the CDC, but for some reason Maryland is unable to do so. I know that this body places a lot of emphasis on the CDC guidelines, evidenced by the social distancing and wearing of masks in the chamber. And I wanted to quote from CDC in its report on abortions. They have a section in there titled Public Health Implications. That report states that ongoing surveillance of legal abortions is important for several reasons. These reasons include, and I quote, 1, evaluating programs aimed at preventing unintended pregnancies, as 42% of unintended pregnancies end in abortion. Efforts to help women avoid unintended pregnancies might reduce the number of abortions. Second, routine abortion surveillance is needed to assess trends in clinical practice patterns over time. Information in this report on the number of abortions performed through different methods and at different gestational ages provides the denominator data that are necessary for analyses of the relative safety of abortion practices. Finally, information on the number of pregnancies ending in abortion is needed in conjunction with data on births and fetal losses to estimate the number of pregnancies in the United States and determine rates for various outcomes of public health importance, for example, adolescent pregnancies. End of quote. The CDC goes on to say that multiple factors influence the incidence of abortion, including access to health care, contraception, state regulations, acceptance of non-marital childbearing, insufficient client-centered counseling, lack of youth-friendly services, low client awareness, and the economy. This amendment isn't about whether you're pro-life or pro-choice. It's about women's health and the ability to collect data to improve upon their health. It's about having the information necessary to make informed decisions to direct adequate services to the area where they're needed the most. And I press the amendment.
On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker?
Red supports the committee. Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Are there any recognizing the minority whip?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. It's Amendment 113027/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a fairly simple and straightforward amendment. It is part of the Medicaid budget where public funding of abortion is addressed. A Marist poll was done in January of almost 1,200 people. And from that poll, we learned that 58% of Americans oppose or strongly oppose using taxpayer dollars to pay for abortion. In Maryland, abortion is not limited for any gestational period. It is available through all 9 months of a woman's pregnancy, right up to the moment that the baby would be born alive. This amendment just simply prohibits taxpayer funding of abortions in the state of Maryland. And with that, I move the amendment.
This subcommittee chair, floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would again ask the body to reject this amendment. We get similar amendments to this every year whenever we do the budget. I will remind folks of a couple of points. First, this language has been in the Maryland budget since the 1970s. We've always had it in there for 40 years. And it has provided a valuable service to the women of our state. By adopting this amendment, we send those women a very clear message that if you can afford health insurance, you're free to have an abortion. But if you're poor and on Medicaid, you're out of luck. I think that is a very unfortunate message to send. We have been doing this for a very long time, and we need to continue to do this so that adequate health care is provided to all Marylanders, regardless of what their income levels are. Please reject this amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore City.
Just wish to correct the record in terms of what Maryland law is regarding when a woman can have an abortion, when she can choose to have an abortion. The dividing line is whether the fetus is capable of sustained survival outside the womb. That is the law adopted by this House and the Senate and approved by the voters, 62 to 38%. On referendum. After the fetus, in the doctor's medical judgment, is capable of sustained survival outside the womb, a fetus can only be performed if there is a serious threat to the life or health of the mother or a serious abnormality in the fetus. That is our law. Thank you.
Maker of the amendment.
Madam Speaker, thank you. And with all due respect to my friend, there are third trimester abortions done in Montgomery County. So I guess he is disobeying the law, and there was an OBGYN that was doing them in Cecil County. So this amendment is not on when an abortion can or cannot be done. This amendment just simply says we should respect taxpayer dollars. 58% of Americans, and I would tell you it's at least that number in Maryland, do not want their tax dollars paying for abortions. We're not limiting abortions. We're just saying tax dollars will not pay for abortions. So I move the amendment and vote to respect taxpayer dollars.
Any further debate on the amendment? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker?
Red vote supports the committee. Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. The gentleman from Cecil in the annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In terms of the earlier discussion that we had on the floor, I do have an amendment at the desk. Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
Order.
633626-1.
Amendment number 1.
This amendment is very straightforward. On page 136 of the bill, just inserts language that says, provided that this appropriation may not be expended to private grants for basic stem cell research, and further provide that this appropriation may be used to provide grants to fund only adult stem cell research. On the amendment, the example that was utilized earlier, although it be tragic, the developments in the research that are taking place in the field of diabetes, bone marrow transplants, etc., the vast majority of those are coming from adult stem cells. The practice, as we talked about earlier, of using embryonic stem cells is frankly anachronistic. If we pass this amendment and we instruct this group that we talked about earlier, which is a Maryland organic state-run fund, we avoid and we dodge all those ethical concerns. They're no longer an impact. I think that this is a fair amendment, not only for our taxpayers, but for advancing this field of research in the form of adult stem cells. I mean, that's what's in vogue now, and that's what's warranting the most results for people that are suffering. And with that, I won't belabor too long because I know it's late in the evening, but I would ask for a favorable vote on this amendment, and with that, I'll go ahead and press it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Committee Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to reject this amendment. I mean, we've had a debate on the floor where we're admitting that the use of embryonic stem cells is on the decline. But still, there are researchers, for whatever reason, or whatever they're researching, are using embryonic stem cells that were approved and it can be used before 2001. 2001. No new group of stem cells has come to the state of Maryland. So I'm just going to ask you to please reject this. I don't know what the embryonic stem cells are being used for. I understand that, the one shot Johnson & Johnson may have used embryonic stem cells. I don't know. But whatever it is, this is a decision for the researchers, not for us. Thank you.
Any further debate? On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call.
Madam Speaker?
Clerk will take the call. The amendment fails. Are there any other amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Special order calendar number 66. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 589, Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2021. Favor report is amended and adopted.
Madam Speaker.
Committee Chair.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I would like to now turn to the amendments on the BRFA that has been adopted by the Appropriations Committee. These, again, will introduce the amendments to the House Bill 589 in groups. After describing them, I will move for each group to be adopted. I ask members to hold any amendments until after the committee amendments have been considered. And with your permission, Madam Speaker, let me now turn to the amendments.
Please proceed.
Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 strikes a provision altering a funding mandate for financial consumer protection in the Office of the Attorney General. Amendment number 3 adds a provision dedicating a portion of certain raffle revenue to the Michael Aaron Bush Sports Fund. Amendment number 4 provides a provision waiving certain reporting requirements for the Maryland Stadium Authority. Amendment number 5 further expands the allowable uses for the blueprint of Maryland's future fund. Amendment 6 and 7 strike provisions that would have altered fiscal 2022 funding for the Cade and Selinger programs. Amendment 8 and 9 strike provisions that would have required unused Senate and delegate scholarship funds to be deposited in the Need-Based Financial Assistance Fund, and repealed a mandate for the Maryland Public Television. Move the adoption of amendments 1 through 9.
Are there any questions on amendments 1 through 9? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Continue, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Amendment 10 limits transfers from the provider assessment for reinsurance program to Medicaid to fiscal 21 and 22 only, and makes technical changes. Amendment 11 phases in the change in the distribution of the CareFirst premium tax exemption for the senior prescription drug assistance program. Amendments 12 and 13 strike provisions that would have reduced the mandate for the city of Annapolis and would have modified the revenue volatility adjustment in fiscal 2022 only. Amendment 14 adds a provision to authorize the use of the Fiscal Responsibility Fund for cost of living adjustment for certain employees in 2023. Amendment 15 strikes a provision that would have reduced the appropriation to the Rainy Day Fund and eliminate the pension and retiree health sweeper in fiscal 2022 only. Move the adoption of amendments 10 through 15.
Are there any questions on amendments 10 through 15? All in favor of amendments 10 through 15 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Well, this is kind of weak. Let's say that again. All in favor of amendments 10 through 15 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Good. Much better. Thank you. May continue on, Madam.
Thank you. Amendments 16 strikes a provision that would have funded the State Arts Council and altered future funding. Amendment 17 strikes a provision that would have altered the allowable use of bond premiums. Amendment 18 and 19 strike the provision to have increased local government expenses. Amendment 20 adds a provision to clarify and streamline the property tax assessment process for land actively used by a county club or golf course. Amendment 21 strikes a provision that would have diverted transfer tax revenue to the general fund for capital eligible projects. Amendment 22 and 23 strike a provision that would have extended the transfer tax repayment schedule by 1 year and deleted the fiscal 22 repayment, and instead increases the share of the fiscal 2022 repayment. Move the adoption of Amendments 16 through 23.
Any questions on Amendments 16 through 23? All in favor of Amendments 16 through 23 signify by saying aye. Opposed? Okay. Continue on, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Amendment 24 strikes a provision that would have increased the Medicaid deficiency assessment. Amendment 25 alters the date for which the rate increases for certain providers are compared. Amendment 26 strikes a provision that would have authorized a transfer from the Board of Pharmacy fund balance. Amendment 27 reduces the transfer of the Medical Cannabis Commission Fund to the Behavioral Health Administration. Amendment 28 provides a provision that would have authorized agencies to charge COVID-19 expenses to local income tax reserve funds while awaiting federal funds. Amendment 29 strikes a provision authorizing a transfer from the Consumer Protection Recovery Fund to the General Fund. And Amendment 30 strikes a provision that would have required certain employees at facilities planned for closure to be transferred to other Department of Public Safety and Correction facilities. Move the adoption of Amendments 24 through 30.
Any questions on Amendments 24 through 30? All in favor of Amendments 24 through 30 signify by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Continue on, Madam Chair.
Last page. Amendment 31 adds a provision that authorizes transfer from the Board of Examiners for Psychologists Fund to the Behavioral Health Administration. Another 32 adds a provision that authorizes transfer from the Rate Stabilization Fund to the General Fund. Amendment 33 adds a provision reducing prior year's funds from the Maryland State Department of Education. Amendment 24 adds a provision to authorize a transfer from Charlotte Hall Veterans Home Fund to the General Fund. Amendments 35 and 37 reduce surplus funding in fiscal 20 and 21. Amendments 38 adds a provision requiring a transfer from the Maryland Capital Park and Planning Commission to the General Fund. Move the adoption of Amendments 31 through 38.
Any questions on Amendment 31 through 38? The gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to separate Amendment number 34 for discussion. Amendment 34, if I heard correctly.
Are there any questions on Amendments 31 through 33? The gentleman from Baltimore County in the Annex. Question on Amendments 31 through 33. Okay, apparently the gentleman has different ones. So we're going to adopt Amendments 31 through 33. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment 34, if I read it correctly, it authorizes a transfer of $1 million from the Charlotte Hall Veterans Home. Charlotte Hall Veterans Home is the only veteran home in the state. There's a 444 bed facility there serving those that served us. So I reached out to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Secretary Owens, who used to be a member of this chamber. He was the majority leader for a number of years. Whip. Thank you. A Calvert County resident. And he responded back, his finance secretary responded back to me in an email. And I just want to read the last paragraph of that email to you. It says $1 million is a full third of the annual revenue going into this bed fund that's being transferred from. It represents $1 million that we will not be able to invest in COVID mitigation, in parking lot improvements, and upgrading equipment at the end of life, etc. Maryland Veterans Administration opposes this transfer. In our budget testimony, Secretary Owens opposed it in our hearing, and at his request, I'm again stating his strong opposition to this action. So with us, members, this is the only facility in the state. These people there, I mean, it's a really nice facility. I remember a few years meeting the House Appropriations there and taking a tour of it. They're really doing God's work. These people have given so much to our country, and I don't know why we're taking this money, but I think it should be restored. So with that, I'd like to, vote on this amendment.
Subcommittee Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much for those comments, and I can tell you that Charlotte Hall is a great facility where care is provided for those who have served our country and our veterans. Let me just provide just a little bit of light on your concern over the $1 million. This is what we call in the budget committees a fund swap. It is not a cut. Let me tell you the reason why it is a fund swap in this particular BRFA. Generally speaking, there is one company that provides care or operations for Charlotte Hall. There's a direct payment, with a billing of about $3 million annually for their services. This year, Charlotte Hall has received $4.2 million under the CARES Act in federal funds. On top of that $4.2 million, they have also received an additional $2 million under federal provider aid under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So this year they have a balance, a fund balance way beyond what they would normally have. And what we have done, and this is not unprecedented, is to capture those general funds. We in the BRFA have done swapped funds to capture that $1 million to relieve pressure on the general fund, because there are federal funds that are in place that have come in to the budget to substitute that $1 million. And so with that, I would hope that this addressed the good gentleman's concerns. We also asked the analysts whether or not this $1 million in swapping funds would impact the operations of providing services on an annual basis, and the analysts replied to us that it would not. And so with that, Madam Speaker, I would ask this body to support the report of the Appropriations Committee.
The gentleman from Baltimore County and the Annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I support the maker of the amendment from St. Mary's County, and I appreciate the comments from the good gentleman from Baltimore City who somewhat explained the reasoning for this. But as the good gentleman from St. Mary's County said, and this is absolutely hard to believe, there is only one veterans facility in the entire state of Maryland. Just one. And this is it. And we're going to take $1 million from them. Every single day for the last year, I have received a phone call from Charlotte Hall Veterans Home. Maybe some of you have, because I have a loved one there. Every day I receive that phone call to tell me about their COVID update and the condition of my loved one that's there. So we just heard that they've received money from the feds in many different ways. They received that money because they have dealt with a problem as many other places have, except they've dealt with it better because they haven't had that loss of life. They've done a stellar job of treating our veterans in the very best way that they can be treated. We can't compare them to anybody else in the state of Maryland because there is nobody else. So if you have a loved one who's a veteran and they have no place to go, that's it. So it's a 3-hour drive to go see him because unfortunately in the state of Maryland, we haven't provided a place in Cecil County for them. We haven't supplied a place in Western Maryland for them. We haven't supplied a place in the local Baltimore, Anne Arundel metropolitan area. We haven't done that. So this is it. This is it. And now, because they've done a good job, because they've had to deal with all these problems, we're just going to take $1 million away from them because somehow they got it from somewhere else. You know, it reminds me of when we gave the funding to the schools when I first got here, and Baltimore County got exactly $1 million worth of funds, and Baltimore County reduced the school budget by exactly $1 million. So we say we want to give our veterans something, but now we're going to look and see they've done a job, they got money from the federal government, and we're going to take this money away from them. That place needs to be bigger. We need more places like that. We don't need to be cutting their funding. We don't need to be taking men and women who have served this country that are at the end of their life, who have nowhere else to go. This is their final stop before their final resting place, and cut money from them. Thank God for private corporations, because I go down there quite often, and I see the private corporations who are there bringing volunteers to spend time with these veterans, because, like I just said, these veterans are far away from their homes, and they can't see their families as much as they should. And these veterans, they're not from foreign countries. These are men and women who entered and gave all for this country, and they gave it all. They came from the state of Maryland, or they retired in the state of Maryland. They're not from somewhere else that were just shipped here. They are Marylanders. They are the very best, the most proud Marylanders. And to take this money away from them is appalling. So I support this amendment. I support our veterans, and in no way should we be looking through the books to find out how we can take a penny away from them. We've taken too much away from them. You know, I was up at the facility in Cecil County years ago when I was a young man, and they explained to me there was actually veterans in that facility who left the battlefield in World War I and spent their entire life in that facility. And when I was 18 years old, there were still World War I veterans who were still in that facility. So let me tell you something. When these guys give it, they give it all. And to take $1 million is shameful. Absolutely shameful. I support this amendment.
Committee Chair.
Thank you. Let me just make something very clear. If you take this budget documents that we just handed you or go on your computer, you will see probably about 60 to 100 references to fund swaps. To fund swaps. We didn't just pick out the veterans to do this. This is when federal money comes in and we backfill it, so on and so forth. And as to Charlotte Hall, this committee has visited Charlotte Hall. We support Charlotte Hall. We have done everything we could to support Charlotte Hall. And if I thought for 1 minute we cut their appropriations, I'd stand here and support the amendment, but we didn't. But you go back through and see how many times you read fund swaps. I mean, the governor, through this time period that we've been here, has brought in millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, federal dollars, that we are now swapping. We just heard supplemental number 4 today, which, by the way, will swap money out of this budget when it gets over to the Senate. So I'm asking you to stand with the committee on this. If we see a problem, we'll fix it. But this is a fund swap. This is not a cut. And I'd ask you to support the committee.
Any further debate? The gentleman from Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to rise in support of the good delegate from St. Mary's County amendment. I also understand the Budget Committee Chair and her explanation of swaps and things like that. My father used to tell me that I couldn't speak and I wasn't very smart, but I knew how to count because I always got his money. But I have to stand in support of Charlotte Hall for whatever we can get for them, even if we can get a little bit more. It's a wonderful facility. I've watched it grow over the years, and all you have to do is take a trip down there and spend an afternoon in there with these guys that are there. It's pitiful. We've been really, really fortunate. We were able to secure a CBOC right across the street, across the highway from the federal government. So we're having more and more veterans coming in there for medical care and mental health services and all that type of thing. And there's one thing for sure, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. If former Delegate George Owens asked or had to crawl across this street full of glass to help them veterans in that building, he would do it. And all the veterans that are here in this room tonight know that. And George is a wonderful person, and I'm proud to have known him as many years as I have. Thank you.
Any further debate? On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Roll call, Madam Speaker.
Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Green supports the committee. Clerk will take the call. The amendment prevails. On committee, on amendments 35 through 38. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? 35 to 38 has been adopted.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. I move that House Bill 589 and its amendments be moved to third reader.
Okay, all in favor of the favorable report signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. HB 589 is now on. Oh, there any other amendments to? Okay. All right. It's been ordered, printed for third reading. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker? We're doing the third readers.
Clerk will take the call. There being 136 members present, the House is still in session. Calendar of third reading House Bills number 58. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 16, Correctional Services, Immigration Detention, Prohibition, Dignity Not Detention Act.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate?
Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Frederick.
Colleagues, as we discussed, this legislation sends the wrong message. As I outlined yesterday, it would be inconceivable to think that we could travel to a foreign country, stay beyond what is legally permitted, and then start breaking laws. This legislation before us now suggests that in Maryland, if you are here illegally and commit additional crimes, there are no consequences. This legislation usurps local authority and will have a significant adverse impact on public safety, not only in my county, but around the state. With that, I'll be voting red. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just urge a red vote for this bill. Once again, this legislation is just a billboard to every single illegal alien in this country to come to Maryland because we have policies. I mean, let's be honest here. The whole state of Maryland, communities, white communities, black communities, immigrant communities, are all safer when we lock up criminal illegal aliens. These people have come here, these individuals, they come here illegally and then they broke another law. I think this bill, it does nothing but interfere with our law enforcement's ability to enforce laws and do their job. We know the purpose of immigration law is really to define who is allowed to come to our country and for how long, and these policies simply mock our immigration laws. We heard yesterday from the delegate from Ocean City how vile and violent some of the criminals are there. We heard that Maryland jobs will be lost because of this bill, because we'll lose that federal money. This bill, it's one of many actions, not just this session, but in years prior, like driver's license for people here illegally, now tax credits for people here illegally, now this. It's, again, policies, sanctuary policies, you name it, welcome flag, come to Maryland. That's one of the reasons, well, many reasons why I oppose this. And I'm not just making this up. A recent NBC article came out that said COVID positive illegal aliens were in this country. And when they asked in the article, they said, where do you plan to go? And Maryland was one of their top destinations. So for all those reasons, I will be voting no. Thank you.
Young lady from Baltimore City.
Madam Speaker, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm here to express my support for this bill. Yesterday, some of my esteemed colleagues shared their perspectives on this bill and referred to folks who are just sitting around eating peanut butter sandwiches. Those comments made in passing were based in reality, because the truth is the people who will be affected by this important bill are the folks who really are just trying to get through their day, work, serve their communities. The example of someone sitting around eating a peanut butter sandwich, that was a true story. There was such a person, a woman, a working woman, a mother. She stopped from her duties as a dishwasher to break for lunch. She sat on a curb on a street in Frederick to have her peanut butter sandwich for lunch. While sitting there, she was approached, racially profiled, and arrested, then detained and held for over a month. She went to work that morning, packed her kids off to school, went to work that morning, and didn't come home again for a month. That woman, she has a name. Her name is Roxana Santos. She's a person. She's a Marylander. Her 4 children call her mommy. Ms. Santos fought back against this illegal detention. And in fact, she won an important victory. The officers who stopped and detained her were wrong. They had violated her constitutional right to be free from unlawful search and seizure. Unfortunately, the damage that was done to Ms. Santos by that unlawful racial profiling and detention left a mark. In fact, a few years later, she was detained again while checking in with ICE for her regular immigration visit. She was detained again, and that time, held in detention, left a mark. It took a toll. Ms. Santos ended up thinking suicidal thoughts, traumatized and psychologically damaged. The harm to her mental health may be irreparable, but we can change the story here tonight. We can stop this sort of traumatic, unlawful, harmful, immoral harm from future Ms. Santoses and from similar families. The bill before us, Dignity Not Detention, gives us a moral choice. I will be voting yes on this bill. I don't want there to be another Roxana Santos in our state, or a family or children left carrying the damage for the rest of their lives. Madam Speaker, thank you.
The gentleman from Baltimore County in the annex and the sponsor of the bill. Montgomery in the annex and the sponsor of the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And first, I just want to thank you and the committee and the floor leader for all of your hard work on this important legislation. Colleagues, over the last couple of days, we've heard a lot about violent criminals and nice jails. In fact, if you were tuning in from home, you might think we were talking about vacation resorts here. And so I just want to set the record straight. This bill is about a depraved federal agency paying counties and private prison companies to pick up regular Marylanders for dumb reasons and subjecting them to inhumane conditions. I'll repeat, this bill stops counties and private prison companies from profiting from the mistreatment of our neighbors. Let me tell you a little bit about one of my neighbors. Pedro Ordonez was brought to this country when he was 7 years old in 1998. The only crime he's ever committed is that he crossed the border. And yet he was sent to the Howard County Detention Center for 8 months while he waited for the federal government to decide not to deport him back to Honduras, a country that he barely knows. He told the Judiciary Committee a couple weeks ago, he testified, and said that the conditions in the detention center were quote-unquote horrendous. His fellow inmates were denied medical attention when they were sick, and that he was in solitary confinement for 45 days. He also told the committee, and I quote, "The gentleman in the cell next to me wanted to commit suicide, and I think God put me in that cell to stop him from going through with it." And Pedro is not the exception. As my good friend from Baltimore City said, Pedro is an exemplar. Pedro is the norm. So colleagues, y'all have an amazing opportunity tonight. With a flick of your finger, you can vote green on this bill and stand firmly on the right side of history. Because our children and grandchildren will look back on what happened in these ICE detention centers with horror. We all have a chance tonight to stand firmly against abuse and depravity and for basic human decency. Maryland is better than humiliating, unnecessary strip searches. Maryland is better than medical neglect. Maryland is better than ICE and its detention centers, and tonight we are gonna prove it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do understand the comments of the previous speakers, and I appreciate that. I wanted to speak about a bigger toll that this entire issue is taking on us. I'd like to comment about a situation that happened in my district and read a bit of an article from the Baltimore Sun. It was before 9 on a Saturday night this month when a CSX engineer notified police that he discovered the body of an 18-year-old woman along railroad tracks in southeast Baltimore. When police officers arrived and began assessing the scene, they saw the body of Michelle Tenezaka in the brush. She had been stabbed multiple times, but soon after they found a second victim yards away and still clinging to life. It was Tenezaka's 17-year-old sister. Both of them had been stabbed dozens of times. And the case soon linked detectives up with police in Baltimore County, who said the surviving girl's boyfriend had been found stabbed near the waterfront in Turner Station. He survived. Now, authorities in the city and county are investigating the involvement of MS-13, a transnational gang that until now, in Maryland, has largely been linked to violence in the D.C. suburbs. If you remember back after 9/11, the federal government put together a task force to study what had happened and where the faults were, how 9/11 happened, why didn't we catch this? And the results of that investigation led to a lot of changes that linked the federal government to state governments and county governments that resulted in a lot of positive changes. And you have to wonder and you have to question when we see such a big gaping hole in our public safety that's frankly just getting worse and worse. Why are we turning a blind eye to this? I mean, these are communities that are across our state now. These are communities that are down the street. It isn't hypothetical. It isn't in your jurisdiction anymore. It's in every jurisdiction. And it's the same story every single time. People want to pressure young people into a gang. They don't want to get involved. They get forced on a bus. These poor kids were forced onto a bus, dropped off at Turner Station, and stabbed to death. I don't see, Immigration is a big part of this country. It's culture, it's history. We love immigrants. We need immigrants. We want immigrants. We want legal immigrants. And in turning a blind eye to illegal immigration, we are creating giant gaping zones of lawlessness. We need immigration. It should be done legally. We shouldn't just turn a blind eye to it. And that's why I'll be voting red today.
Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and colleagues. Much has been said about the so-called benefits of these for-profit immigration jails, and I will tell you, it is my clear view that these are not community amenities. So let me keep this very simple. A green vote says that Maryland does not balance budgets using family separation. A red vote continues our ridiculous practice of allowing Maryland counties to essentially Airbnb spare prison cells to ICE for extra cash. And as you've been hearing constantly here, listen to what we heard today. Efforts to link immigrants to disease and COVID-19. We had efforts yesterday to link immigrants to 9/11. We were reminded of 9/11 terrorism in connection with this bill. So let me just bring you back to the facts. A majority of these ICE detainees are not criminals. They're certainly not criminals in the way you and I think of criminals. The crime for most of them was crossing the border, and an even larger percentage of them were traffic offenses. So again, it's not the picture you've been told. And if we shut these facilities, these people, it's not like we're going to ignore the law and stop enforcing murder. No, they're just going to be sent to another state, Virginia or Pennsylvania. So again, I'm not sure what the interest in the minority party is in keeping the so-called child rapists that are pointing to closer to home. But what we do know is when we allow the counties to Airbnb all these spare jail cells, they fill them with our neighbors, the non-criminal ones. So once again, it's very simple. A green vote says Maryland does not balance budgets on family separation. Thank you.
Gentleman from Montgomery County in the annex. Okay. Gentleman is no longer speaking. Gentleman from Frederick.
So there's been a lot of associations. And let me just start off by saying I didn't start out by naming all sorts of offenses and that all immigrants have done this and done that. But I will tell you that everyone that's been picked up is not eating a sandwich. Let's start with that association. Picking a case in Frederick from 2008, by the way, the program in Frederick started in 2008. The policies have changed. Since then, the only person that enters the ICE program is someone that commits an arrestable offense, not eating a sandwich. I mean, do I need to go through every single offense that someone's been picked up for? Child molestation? Do you want me to do that? I mean, are we just going to compare eating sandwiches to other offenses? I don't need to do that. I'm not going to go there. What I'm suggesting is the following, and these are the facts. In the 3 jurisdictions that we have, you don't enter the program unless you commit an arrestable offense. That's it. Eating a sandwich isn't going to cut it. And to the floor leader's point about shipping people to a different state, well, what about our responsibility for public safety? If we have people living in our state that commit a crime, they need to be held accountable in our state for committing a crime. I don't want to just push them off to Pennsylvania or somewhere else. And look, I get the optics. We don't want to separate families. We don't want people to suffer. But there are laws. And when you commit a crime, you need to be held accountable. And if you happen to have some documentation issues, well, that's going to complicate matters worse. I'm sorry. It'd be no different than if I traveled abroad and it happened to me. I'm sure it'd be much worse. That's what this is about. So again, I appreciate the stories about the sandwiches and about Frederick and about strip searches, but that's not the case. I would argue I'm the only person in this chamber who's actually ever visited a 287G program in our state. Took the time to do the research, ask the questions, talk to people. And for some of you, you may not know this, but I'm a Latino representing Frederick County. So throwing around names, sandwiches, this and that, it's not going to cut it. I draw the line at committing arrestable offenses. That's where I draw it. If we want to talk about immigration reform, let's have that conversation. But let's not turn this into something it isn't. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Floor Leader.
I'll be brief, Madam Speaker. Look, these policies have been constantly shifting. The county executive changes in Howard County. Suddenly you have one position. The county council on a 3-2 vote had another position. You're suggesting to me that in Frederick the policies have been changing over time. I would suggest that part of the motivation might have been the lawsuits that led to hundreds of thousands of dollars in settlements for, yes, a lady being picked up for eating a sandwich. So I don't think that example is very helpful to your cause here. And the fact that we keep changing these policies, the 3 counties that have these jails, these ICE jails, they don't even have the same policy. They have completely different policies. Worcester lets anyone in. Men, women, they allow criminals, non-criminals. Frederick finally decided after constant protests to change their policy a bit, and Howard the same thing. So Howard had a population of about 100 immigrants in their prison, and now it's dwindled to about a dozen because of the protests. So we cannot have this herky-jerky policy based on whether Biden or Trump is in the White House. Our residents need the protection now, and ICE and the counties have shown they cannot be trusted. They cannot be trusted with the discretion. Strip searching violations dating back years for audits for all 3 facilities. The strip searches were unnecessary. They were to visits to court, to church, to legal visits, to medical appointments, and in no instances in Howard County did they even find any contraband. So you cannot tell me this is all normal and everyone in there is a child rapist. It's simply not true. Ladies and gentlemen, let's end this game now. Turn the page. We had mass shootings of Asian people this very week. Do you know why that was happening? Because people keep taking people that look different from them and attributing disease, 9/11, terrorism, rape of childs. I mean, come on. We're hearing it. The evidence is right here. End this nonsense.
Is there any further debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 85 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 16, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 31, Court Surcharges and Payment to Special Funds, Prohibited Lease Provisions.
Gentleman from Talbot in the annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise once again to discuss landlord-tenant legislation, of which there's much of that happening this week. Could the floor leader rise for some questions?
Good evening.
Good evening. So this one missed me on second reader, my fault. And I'd like to ask a couple questions on this bill. Could you just briefly describe what the bill does?
What the bill does, it does 2 things in particular. One thing it does is it increases the court fees to file a civil action in both circuit and district court. It raises the court fees to make a filing in circuit court to $30. It raises district court fees to $10. It raises district court fees by $10. With that money going to MLSC to help fill a deficit in their ongoing grants program. It also raises the cost of filing a summary eviction, the first step in the eviction process, effectively from $15 to $75. In Baltimore City, it's $85 because they add a $10 surcharge for the sheriffs.
Why the big jump in the fee? What's the rationale behind that?
We are one of the lowest in the country. We have seen, there have been examples, the committee saw examples where there would be mass filings. We've had 660,000 of these filings in fiscal year 2019, prior to the pandemic. The arguments were that people were effectively using district court as a collections agency as opposed to a court of equity.
Does the fiscal note, as the bill is introduced, does that fiscal note still apply, or after amended, did it change?
It probably changed. It probably changed a little bit. The rise in the civil court fees will probably increase about $3.5 million more to MLSC. The amount that the rise in the summary ejectment costs, it's if all things stayed equal and another 668,000 or 600, I think it's about 668,000 summary ejectments were filed going forward. Right now, you can't really file these things because the courts are basically closed. But if you have 668,000, it would raise about $40 million. That would be split equally, 20 million and 20 million between the right to counsel fund and 20 million to renters assistance.
That is and thank you for sharing the numbers, but that is a huge fiscal note being levied on small business. Would you agree?
I think that what especially, I'm suspecting that you're talking specifically about the summary ejectment. What it does is it puts us to the regional average. The regional average here is about $68, puts us a little above the regional average, and it puts us still well below the national average, which is about $125.
But at the end of the day, the fiscal note is paid for by the landlords. Actually, it's paid for by the tenants. But the point is, the landlords pay into this when they go to court. Is that correct?
Right. The landlords pay the fee to file a summary ejectment when they file the summary ejectment when they go to court.
Right. And so the nexus on this is House Bill 18. That's the one that creates the right to counsel. So this ends up being the funding mechanism for House Bill 18. Do I have it right? I may not, but I'm just asking.
It provides money for the right to counsel fund. And again, the question will be whether as many summary ejectments are filed, given the fee change. I certainly suspect that fewer will be filed, so I'm not sure that it will result in a $40 million cost. I think it will probably be less.
Well, I mean, I think it's noteworthy because what I think we're having happen here is that the landlords are paying into a fee so they can be sued, basically. I mean, the council's being paid for by them. And I don't know, you're in judiciary, you're the chair of the committee. Are there any other examples in Maryland law where the plaintiff ends up paying for the defendant's defense?
Where the plaintiff ends up paying for
Yes, 31's funding through landlord fees. House Bill 18, which is the free right to counsel that was discussed on second reader yesterday.
I mean, there could be a shifting for attorney's fees in any number of different cases. We also pay for lawyers as part of the public defender, and we pay for those through everybody's taxes. We pay for those on the criminal side. So.
Right, but the shifting of fees, to the extent that happens, the judge decides that. Don't they get to decide? And what's interesting about House Bill 18 is we're taking away the judge's discretion. Why would we take away the judge's discretion as to what to do with the fees if the landlord in this situation would be asking to have those fees recovered?
You're talking about the recovery of fees?
Yes, because that's part of the point I'm making on this bill. You're taking money away for which there's no mechanism for the landlord to be made whole if there's a justifiable reason for showing up in court. The judge no longer has the right to decide those things here.
Well, the judge, generally speaking, doesn't come into play as to whether the fee is actually initially levied or not ever. I mean, that's just the fee that is set, and then you file the case. If you're talking about the landlord's ability to recover, right now the landlord can recover this fee from tenants every single time. The legislation says that the first 3 times that this happens in a year, then the tenant can't recover that. If it continues to happen after that time, then the tenant could recover that. Or I'm sorry, the landlord could recover that.
All right. Well, I mean, we're arguing semantics. At the end of the day, the landlord's paying for their own suit being filed against them or their attorneys. Can we talk about briefly the point you just made up, which is this 3 times in 1 year? How are you defining that? If I have a tenant that I start their lease on June, say, how does the law describe that? Is it 3 in a calendar year or 3 in a year based on when the lease is started?
3 in a year, so it would be, I would think that year would start from the time that a first summary ejectment was filed.
Do you think that's clear in the bill, or do you think the bill needs some adjustment to make sure that we're right on that?
I think it's clear in the bill.
Okay, so with your testimony on the floor, you're saying when the first filing's made.
With my comments on the floor, that's right. Testimony is something that you give under oath. These are.
Well, I mean, I think we can rely on this as being legislative intent because I think it's important. I think you're silent in the bill in this regard. Yeah. So the answer is three times in a calendar year.
3 times within the span of a year.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Floor Leader. Madam Speaker, on the bill, I stand for the 3rd time on landlord-tenant issues, and I think that in some cases there's going to be agreement that tenants need assistance, financial assistance. The difficulty here is we are putting, in this particular legislative session, a tremendous difficulty on landlords. And we can use the word landlord, but we are housing providers. We are the people that are giving Maryland citizens housing, and in many cases affordable housing. And we're passing legislation that creates difficulties where, I've got to say to you, many landlords are asking, why would I be in the business when I can't handle my business in a normal fashion? It's one thing to have the executive order of the governor halt evictions. It's one thing during a pandemic where everybody agrees that we need to change the rules. But we're taking advantage of the landlord's good interests in this case and making permanent law change as it relates to how we conduct business in a formal setting. I believe that fiscal note is somewhat egregious. $40 million being levied on landlords on top of the pandemic, on top of the challenges they're having with non-payment of rent. And I believe that the legislature is fighting against itself on the fundamental principle of how we're providing housing for Maryland citizens. The vast majority of landlords are the good guys and gals, the ones that you count on to help Maryland citizens. And so we're creating this one-size-fits-all where we're assuming the worst. We're making everybody pay for the bad actors. And at the same time, we are giving certain benefits under the law to tenants who, in some cases, need to be evicted from the property for non-payment of rent. And we don't argue with the idea if there's disagreements. There's a judge that shows up at every one of these settings. And I believe that the bill, the funding mechanism, we can take a whole look at what's happening right now in Maryland with our business climate. And this bill is asking monies to be paid at a very difficult time. These landlords are already hundreds, if not thousands of dollars behind in rent. We're saying to them, here, pay an additional fee, which is basically a slap in the face. And why, at the end of the day, are we fighting those same people who are trying to provide housing for citizens in the state of Maryland? We should be handing our right hand out and shaking hands with landlords, trying to figure out how to help This is not always through the lens of tenant rights. It needs to be understood that a lease is a contract between two parties. These two parties willingly enter into that contract, and that contract should be respected. I mean, that's the end of the day. I don't know what court proceeding would require this sort of action. I know that the floor leader is interested in lead paint. Well, you know, MDE has jurisdiction on lead paint. There may be other issues with health or safety. You know, there's landlord licensing. So I would ask the legislative body to turn a red vote on this bill. A $40 million fiscal note is the storyline being levied on your landlords in your districts, but it's a $40 million fiscal note being levied on, ultimately, the tenants, because the landlord will find a way. It has to. We can't just take costs on top of costs. We can't take non-payment of rent and just assume, for the sake of the conversation, that there's money in our back pocket to fund these sort of things. And so at the end of the day, by definition, even if the bill says you can't pass this fee on, by definition, we have costs. We have revenue, we have expenses. And at the end of the day, when we look at our banks, when we look at our CPAs, we have to balance our budget. And we balance our budget by making sure we increase revenues to match these expenses. We are levying heavy responsibilities, financial costs, obligations that will ultimately hurt the tenant, the one that we are trying to help most at this time. And a final note is that these landlords that have given up and said, we've had enough, these are probably small family that have 5, 4, 3, 2, maybe even 1 rental property. These are almost surely the good guys who are doing a good thing, trying to create some wealth for their family, no doubt. But they're interested in making sure that the property is in the condition it needs to be in, that we're taking care of the tenant that's in that space. And these are the ones that get hurt most, and they'll be out. They're going to be out of the game. And I just cannot believe, respectfully, that we've had these many bills coming on top of the landlords. Somewhere along the way, we need to say as a legislature that our landlords are to be respected, admired, and thanked for the work that we do to provide housing for Maryland citizens. And one-size-fits-all bills that lay heavy mandates on our ultimately on our citizens is just the wrong path. So would ask for a red vote on this bill.
Madam Speaker.
Speaker.
Gentleman from Western Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the committee chair, my good friend from Baltimore City, rise? I did have a question on a little bit different tack. Correct me if I'm reading this wrong. The bill also to pay for this fund, the tenant legal assistance fund, for want of a better term, it's also going to impose, beyond raising the fees specifically related to landlord-tenant type matters, is it also going to impose an additional fee or a surcharge upon basically almost all? There's some exempted that I think you and I both know of in the law. When you file certain types of civil cases, you can get an exemption from the filing fee. But other than those exemptions, is this going to impose an additional surcharge upon all people from the state of Maryland filing a civil action?
No, and that's why I divided them up at the beginning.
Okay.
So the people who file a civil case in circuit court, civil case in district court, that money does go to MLSC. But right now, that money, the increase in the bill for MLSC directly from those two, the $30 increase for civil civil case in circuit, the $10 increase for a civil case in district court, it would raise about $3 million. And the reason that we need to do that is that it goes to fill a deficit for MLSC's ordinary, for their ordinary work. Normally, MLSC is funded, as you're aware, through taking the interest on escrow accounts.
IOLTA, right.
IOLTA.
Interest on lawyers' trust accounts, yes.
Right, and because the interest rates are at the bottom of the barrel right now, and in part because we aren't moving as many cases through, they're not getting the fees that are there that are normally charged because there aren't as many people who are filing cases anyway. So there is that deficit that's happening, and so this helps to deal with that. And that also puts us again closer to the national average for what it costs to file both in circuit and district.
I thank you for that explanation. Madam Speaker, and I do it, I appreciate that, and maybe those additional fees are not going specifically to this fund, but I got to tell you who pays those fees. It ain't me. Who pays those fees is the middle class teacher, the mom, the divorcee, who she files for divorce, and she's got to pay those fees. So she's now paying for MLSC, and part of MLSC is paying for this tenant fund. It's the person, so when I advance the fees, I have someone who's grievously injured by someone else's negligence. They're paralyzed in an auto accident. They're injured in an industrial setting, an accident. And I advance the fee out of my pocket to pay for their filing fee, which when I started in this assembly in 2015 was, I think, $110. It was, I believe, $110. Today it's $165. We passed the bill, it's going to go to $195. So we're getting higher and higher and higher. I take that money back from them. You are taking money with all of these fee increases and fee rates, and even if you believe in the value of the program, you are passing those costs along. It doesn't come from out of the thin air, and unfortunately we can't print any more money from the federal government to get it paid. When you do these fee increases for these programs, you are taking the money not from the rich, not from the top 1%, not from Jared Kushner. You're ultimately passing those costs along to regular folks who need legal services, and they pay for it. And by a combination of that reasoning and the fact that, as my good friend from the Eastern Shore discussed, this is, again, passing these costs along to the landlords, to normal folks, and they will eventually have to pass the costs along to the tenants, to the good tenants, to the tenants who pay their rent on time religiously. I think this bill is not the appropriate response at this time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I support affordable housing, and this is the second bill today that makes housing less affordable. Look at the fiscal note, $43 million in fees. And those that say that these fees won't be passed on to the tenants, keep in mind that the original draft of this bill prevented that, had to be struck. So absolutely, this money is going to be applied to tenants. It's essentially a renter's tax. It's a renter's tax on good tenants who pay their rent to provide legal counsel for those tenants that do not pay their rent. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's what the majority of people looking for houses is looking for. And I urge the body to follow me with a red vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is there any further debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
To explain my vote, Madam Speaker.
Yes, the gentlelady from Baltimore City, explain her vote.
I think this is a very clear bill. It's very simple, and all it does is get us in line with the other jurisdictions surrounding us. So it makes sense, and it funds an incredibly important service that will make sure that we're protecting Marylanders and making the judicial system work better. I'm proud to cast a green vote on this bill.
Clerk will call the roll. There are 80 votes in the affirmative. House Bill 31, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 114, Maryland Transit Administration Funding, Transit Safety and Investment Act.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? Recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to just make a few comments on this bill, House Bill 114. I'd like to point out that we need to have a balanced funding approach across the state and across all modes of transportation. Even before COVID-19, we were seeing declines in transit ridership. Some modes of transit continue to see passenger declines of more than 800% from over a year ago. We're on a long road back to recovery. Under Secretary Slater, the department is already making significant strides in rebalancing the transportation program, and we need to give the Secretary and MDOT some more time when there is not a global pandemic underway to develop a long-term plan for addressing MTA's state of good repair needs. The existing transit funding mandates already results in more than half of MDOT's 6-year program going to transit. That leaves less than 50% of the department's budget to fund all the needs of the statewide highway system, BWI Marshall Airport, the Port of Baltimore, and the MBA. The timing of this bill is bad. We know the state is set to receive billions of dollars in additional federal aid, and we don't know yet how much of that money can start chipping away at the backlog of system preservation needs. MDOT is responsible for the entire transportation system, and funding MTA at higher levels is unsustainable and detrimental to the rest of our statewide network. For those reasons, I'll be voting against this bill.
Recognizing the subcommittee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the minority whip for actually correctly characterizing what this bill is. It's about state of good repair and system preservation. About 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, this General Assembly tasked in legislation that MDOT and MTA do a capital needs inventory to look at their funding backlog, not on great new shiny rail lines or bus rapid transit systems or all the other stuff I daydream about all day in appropriations, but how to deal with the system we currently have. Now, I don't know about you all, but when you go to the chair of the Appropriations Committee or pass a bill asking for a report, I don't know what you do with those reports, but I know when there's a report that comes across my desk on an issue I care about, I go to work. And that's what the sponsor of this bill did. When this report came in and found a $2 billion funding backlog on state of good repair, safety issues for the Maryland Transit Administration, she put together a bill to try to help the state get ahead of those issues, because we can't have month-long subway shutdowns in Baltimore. We can't have sinkholes under light rail lines. We can't have MARC rail systems, which go to all different parts of the state, including Baltimore and Hartford County, have busted rail, busted trains, and other breakdowns. So I think this is a measured bill. In fact, as amended, the first couple of years of this bill, if you look at the amendment, increase what the sponsor put in. That's because, thanks to the work of Secretary Slater, who my friend the minority whip credited, MDOT is starting to work on this issue, but they need more funding certainty to make sure that they're going to take this backlog seriously. So it's really important that we move forward with this bill. I'd ask the body for a favorable vote. Let me also add, as amended, the bill provides really necessary funding for small businesses adversely affected by the Purple Line construction. Now, obviously, every major construction project has some negative impacts, but unfortunately, the Purple Line project's been a little bit mismanaged, and it's going to take years longer to complete, years longer for those businesses to get their parking lots back. Yes, I said parking lots, colleagues. I know some people drive. It's going to take them years to be able to get people in and out of their businesses again, and this provides really needed support for those small businesses, a real priority for Montgomery and Prince George's County. I thank the sponsor for the bill. I thank the speaker. Please vote green.
Is there any further debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 101 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 114, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 183, Public Information Act, Revisions, Equitable Access to Records Act.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 135 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 183, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 204, Environment and Natural Resources, Complaints, Inspections, and Enforcement, Information, Maintenance, and Reporting.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? Recognizing the gentleman from Talbot.
Thank you, Speaker. I just wanted to take a second because we do a lot of amending, and I offered an amendment on this bill, and it was accepted, and I think that's a good thing. And the automatic reaction is are you going to vote for this bill? As a back and forth. And I just wanted to explain to everyone that I'll be voting against the bill. I'll be voting against the bill. I think the amendment made the bill better. The underlying issue, the critical issue with this legislation is the fact that it's focused on alleged violations. I drive home just about every night. Probably won't tonight, but I drove home last night, and I convened a group at a place in the morning where I usually go, and we're all there. It's about 12 or 13 guys and gals, Republican, Democrat. They really don't care about politics. They've got all kinds of backgrounds, except most of them are older. And I took a straw poll this morning, and I explained to them about the legislation. I told them I was morally torn because I appreciated the fact that a good faith offer was accepted. And I said, here's what the bill does. And they looked at me and said, Johnny, if that becomes law and my name shows up, tell those guys over there I'm suing them. And that was the immediate reaction. These are local people that have grown up in this incredibly environmentally sensitive area. I think we're taking a very dangerous step, and you heard the amendments about dealing with the allegation portion of this legislation into a foray that if you're not in the area where these allegations are made, it is opening up a Pandora's box of problems and liability. But thank you for taking the amendment, and I'll be voting no, and I urge everyone to push red.
The committee chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank the good delegate from the shore. He offered a logical, sensible amendment, and we agreed to add it to the bill because it made sense. However, I have to say that for government to properly function and for the populace to be able to help in cleaning up the environment, you need to have reasonable transparency. What is reasonable transparency? It's knowing what's going on in your neighborhood, in your county, in your state, but it's not knowing the name of the person necessarily. This is a bill that promotes transparency, yes, in those very sensitive ecological areas. It's important. It's important to cleaning up the Bay and to cleaning up the state of Maryland, and I thank the delegate for the amendment. I would thank him even more if he voted for the bill, of course.
Is there any further debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 96 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 204, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1121, Juvenile Services Work Group to develop evidence-based, research-based, and culturally competent practices.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 130 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1121, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Calendar of third reading, House Bills number 61. Clerk, read first bill.
House Bill 501, Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission Board of Ethics Financial Disclosure Statements, Late Fees.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 136 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 501, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 517, Clean Energy Loan Program, Remediation and Resiliency.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 113 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 517, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 789, Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, Video and Audio Streamings and Archiving Meetings and Financial Assistance.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 133 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 789, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 794, Carroll County Sheriff Salary.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 135 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 794, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1097, St. Mary's County Local Officials Salaries.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 135 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1097, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1160, Culvert County Long-Term Contracts for Cellular Tower Leases.
It's on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1160, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Calendar of third reading, House Bills number 49. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 12, Alcoholic Beverages Sale or Delivery for Off-Premises Consumption.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? Gentleman from Western Maryland in the annex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the floor leader yield for a question?
Sure.
Thank you. Am I right that this bill would take what's a current policy and make it permanent?
Yes, it will make it statewide. It's not permanent, it's only for 2 years.
And then what would happen after 2 years?
After 2 years, it'll sunset, and we will come back to the General Assembly. And at that time, we'll decide we'll see how it's working, and we'll make that decision then as to what's necessary at that time. Do we continue it, or do we allow it to sunset? It's going to be based on how well the industry's doing.
Very good. I do appreciate some of the logic for wanting to do this, to try and help restaurants and taverns. But I do see some potential problems by extending it beyond just the COVID-19 situation that we've been in. And I guess one question I have is to describe the process. When someone gets a mixed drink or an alcoholic beverage, they can go in And how do they order? Can you just describe what would happen, be
Well,
allowed in this bill?
they would actually place an order. It's for delivery. It's delivery purposes, really. So they'll actually, the driver will drive it. It has to be a person 21 years of age that will deliver the beverage. The beverage is in a container. The container has a sealed top on it with no holes in it for a straw. So they deliver it. I mean, it's just a delivery, pretty much a delivery of food. When they do the delivery, the food that's ordered has to be regular food, and it can't be just packaged foods like potato chips, pretzels, stuff like that. Has to be real food, along with the alcoholic beverage that's ordered.
So, couldn't someone walk into a restaurant and then leave with food and then also this beverage that's a mixed beverage?
Could they? What do you mean? Could they walk in and leave? I
Like,
mean,
would
if
they
you
have
walk
to-
in, you can sit and eat if you so choose. But if it's a delivery, that's when this all comes into play.
I guess my question is, couldn't you also get it for carry out? Couldn't you just walk in and leave?
Sure, you could.
Okay, great. So it's not like a delivery person necessarily has to deliver it to someone's house, but it's for carry out.
Well, if you call for carry out, then it would be carry out. But if it's a delivery, then that's the way that it is delivered.
Could this possibly lead to like situations like in North Carolina where you have a drive-up, drive-through where you could get maybe food and a mixed beverage at the same time?
Could you get I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
Sure. I guess they call it a brew-through, like in North Carolina, where you can drive up, just like McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, order your food, order the mixed beverage, get it.
No, you can't do that. It's not that kind of. It's not a McDonald's. It's not a Burger King. This is for restaurants that have had serious troubles with the COVID during the times of COVID and not doing well in the industry. This is the way to uplift them and help them along through this time.
I guess one question I have too is some of the advocates that have testified for or against this bill. Do you know if Mothers Against Drunk Driving, if they've been informed of this bill, if they have a position or not?
No, I don't know if they have a position in that. I'm not sure. I don't recall them testifying. No, they did not testify.
Okay.
But they did not, nor did we have any mothers or any phone calls regarding the bill as to being negative. We had no negative. I've had none anyway, and nor did I hear any during the hearing in the committee.
Have the liquor boards across the state testified on behalf or against or neutral towards this bill?
No, because it's only a couple of liquor boards. You have Baltimore City that has its own liquor board, and of course Annapolis. The rest of them are they don't have a liquor board. It's pretty much the state.
Yeah, I'm not sure each of the different. I know Washington County does have a liquor board, but I haven't been aware that they've taken a position on this. How about the police or the state police? Have they taken a position for or against, or just neutral?
No, we haven't heard from the state police.
Okay. Great, thank you. So I guess just a couple of concerns are, with a beverage like this that you leave in your car, you probably put it in the cup container next to you. The law is pretty harsh if you're caught with an open container. Now, I know that it's sealed when you get it right from the restaurant, kind of sealed. It's got basically like a McDonald's cup. It's got the top on there. It's not necessarily taped down.
No one is going to leave their drink in a car. I mean, it's delivered to a home, and the person receiving it has to be 21 years of age. I mean, you're not going to deliver it to a car. You can't deliver it to another establishment that sells alcohol. You can't deliver it to no other place than the place that actually have ordered have placed the order. That's it.
I guess that gets back to my question about carryouts. If you could order it for carryout, walk in, get your food, get the beverage, and then put it in your car. Is that?
If you have the proper identification and it's sealed, I mean, then that makes it legal. It's got to be sealed, and whatever the authorities of that local government says that can be consumed in that particular carry-out package is what it is. I mean, and we're allowing the local areas to decide what that consumption level will be.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess my concern is that it could easily, someone could be tricked, not tricked, but they wouldn't necessarily know the law, that they would be in a harsh punishment if they had an open container in their car. And I think this really allows for that to happen. And there's another aspect to this bill that I'd also like to bring up. There were several people who did testify against the bill. And one of them said it would be easier to give minors this type of beverage because someone could order the food and the alcohol, and it wouldn't be very much alcohol itself. The cost would be much less than trying to get larger containers, and that someone could just give that to a minor to drink and sell it that way. So I guess those two concerns is why I'm going to vote no. But I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Chair of the committee.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is not something we just dreamed up. We've been doing this for the last year. All these, well, this could happen or that could happen. If it was happening, it would have been brought to the committee's attention. All we're doing is the small businesses that we hear so much about that needs help. We're extending this for 2 years so they can get back on their feet. That's all we're doing. Everything else, again, all these scenarios and so forth, we would have heard about it if they were going on. For these reasons, I'd ask that we support the bill.
Please, subcommittee chair.
And also, let me add, this is an extension. This has already been going on. The governor's already approved this through his executive order. So we've already been doing it. It's been working well. We haven't had any problems, nor have we had any reports of any problem. This bill passed out of the committee with only one nay vote. One. So this is a great bill, ladies and gentlemen, and it's good for Maryland. And remember, 2 years. That's all we're doing this for. We'll come back to this General Assembly, and the sunsets towards the end of the session. We can make a decision at that time whether we're going to allow it to sunset or whether the industry is doing well enough that we can discontinue it. So I ask for a green vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Any further debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 127 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 12, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 312, Harford County Alcoholic Beverages Assisted Living Program License.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 312, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 323, Queen Anne's County Alcoholic Beverages, a repeal of place of worship prohibition.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 323, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 349, Queen Anne's County Alcoholic Beverages, unannounced visits by inspectors.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 133 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 349, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 428, Montgomery County Alcoholic Beverages Licenses, Annual Fees.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 428, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1002, Unemployment Insurance Provisions and Special Enrollment Period for Health Benefits.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 94 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1002, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1108, Washington County Alcoholic Beverages Special Event Permits for Wineries.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 134 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1108, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Calendar of third reading, House Bills number 57. The clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 4, Baltimore County Career Exploration and Development Activities in Public High Schools, prohibiting a ban on the regulation of sale of coffee.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 136 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 4, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read next bill.
House Bill 181, Baltimore County Board of Education, Election of Officers.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 136 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 181, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 468, Baltimore County School Board Nominating Commission Vacancy Procedures.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 135 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 468, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 530, St. Mary's County Gaming Administration of Bingo Licenses.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 136 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 530, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 571, Montgomery County Disabled Active Duty Service Members, Disabled Veterans, and Surviving Spouses Property Tax Abatement.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 135 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 571, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 692, Cecil County Board of Education member terms and compensation.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 136 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 692, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 981, Prince George's County Tax Sales Limited Auction.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 135 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 981, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1179, Wacomico County Property Tax Credit, Hotel or Residential Development.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
has everyone recorded the vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 135 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1179, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1219, Baltimore City Tax Sales Notice.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 136 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1219, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read next bill.
House Bill 1222, Baltimore City Tax Sales Notice Requirements.
Is on third reading and final passage. Is there any debate? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 136 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 1222, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Special Order Calendar number 68. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 418, County Boards of Education Symbols of Hate Policy. Favorable report is amended, adopted.
Recognize the maker of the motion, the gentleman from Calvin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All of my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Are there any additional amendments to the bill to its title? Hearing none, the bill is ordered printed for third reading. Will the chairman's, standing committee chairmen please come up? Could everyone please take their seats? We will be meeting tomorrow at 12 noon. You're going to be hearing from your committee chairs, which I'm going to call on them now. Judiciary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members of the House. The House Judiciary Committee will meet for a voting session at 9:30 tonight. We'll also, leave it alone, and we'll also meet for a voting session at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Health and Government Operations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Health and Government Operations Committee will also be meeting for our scheduled voting session tonight. Tomorrow we have some early morning subcommittees and a later one, and the later one will be moved to before session tomorrow. So listen up for details of that. We'll be sending things out. Thank you.
Environment and Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the subcommittee chairs and members of the committee, ordinarily we were going to have subcommittees meeting from 12:30 to 3:30. I'd like the subcommittee chairs to contact me. We're going to have to reschedule all that starting at 9 o'clock. So just, I don't know if I'm going to be able to put together a Zoom link, but let's get in touch right after session tonight.
Ways and Means.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We're canceling tonight's voting session, and we're going to vote tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. So if any of the subcommittees need to meet before 11, you can. We have just 5 bills on our voting list for tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Economic Matters.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll see you guys on the floor tomorrow.
Appropriations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll see everybody on the floor tomorrow as well, but we're going to have a voting session after the floor tomorrow.
Madam Speaker.
Judiciary.
Let me revise. I'll try to get us going a little bit sooner. We'll start a voting session at 9:15.
Madam Speaker.
Environment, Transportation. Yes. 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 I called on you.
Oh.
Yes. You had a question?
Me?
No, I want to change my announcement to the members, to the Republican leader and all the subcommittee chairs. Let's just all meet in the committee common area. There's plenty of room to spread out. It'll be a more efficient way to plan tomorrow.
Okay. Ways and Means. Health and Government Operations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This chairman seems to have forgotten that we have a hearing tomorrow at 1:30. I am not sure what we're going to do about that, but we'll figure it out. Just a heads up to everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Quorum call before adjournment.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their presence? Clerk will take the call. We are still in session. Clerk will take the call. We have 132 members present. The House is still in session, recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stand adjourned until Friday.